Hi, welcome to my channel. This fun story is about a guy who wakes up in another world, but instead of getting special superpowers or weapons, his whole house was moved with him. Now he's trying to survive with his new demon neighbors. When he woke up in his home, he looked out the window and was horrified as he found himself in a completely different place. Instead of malls and stores, there was a dense forest and no buildings nearby. The guy couldn't understand where everything had disappeared to and why there were only trees and mountains around. G suggested that for some unknown reason he had been transported to a parallel world. The perplexed young man sat down at the table and began to ponder what he should do, for he had drawn a lot of manga, but turning in his work was not an option. After a while, Hu decided to find out more about the place he was in. Jihu got on his scooter and rushed through the forest, where there seemed to be nothing alive but plants. After driving a few meters, he found a creek and headed along it. The fog was thickening. At a certain point, he reached a small lake in which a young maiden was bathing. The girl was pretty enough, which attracted the attention of the protagonist. Ji in turn stared at the stranger, trying to figure out who she was and what kind of world this was. After a moment, the young lady noticed the guy and asked who he was and what he was doing here. Thinking it was some kind of trap, Hu turned his scooter in the opposite direction and rushed further into the forest. Chai in turn was outraged that her charms had no effect on the youngster. Consequently, Jir decided to catch up with Jihu by clinging to trees with her webbing and moving around like a Spider-Man. The guy was puzzled and asked her if she was a descendant of that particular superhero. The stranger ignored the question, continuing to move extremely fast, intending to catch up with the frightened youngster, who in turn didn't understand what was going on or why she was chasing him. Hu needed to get to the only safe place, his home, but the scooter was too slow. The unknown Spider-Woman couldn't accept that the young man didn't appreciate her. Seconds later, Jihu saw a huge amount of cobwebs above him. The protagonist began nervously beating all the buttons on the scooter, naively believing that by doing so he would give it speed. However, the scooter suddenly turned into a huge motorcycle. Ji was shocked by this transformation of the bike. Meanwhile, the futuristic Iron Horse was actively gaining speed. Swimming crocodiles in the lake saw the kid and prepared to attack him. But the speed of the motorcycle was so great that it knocked down the alligators like skittles and rode on. Jihu barely had time to dodge the sheer number of trees in the forest. There was no way he could slow his Mustang down, and he didn't know how to stop it. Jir was also amazed at such incredible speed of the metal machine. Meanwhile, Hu reached his home and began to ponder what he should do next. At that moment, the young man found a huge rock flying at him. Ji was horrified. The protagonist instantly rushed forward, thus managing to save himself by driving into the grounds of his house. The irrepressible spider began to threaten him, urging him not to be a coward and run away. She followed him, but ran into an invisible protective barrier that prevented her from entering the courtyard. Jihu realized the advantage of a relocated home and watched the perplexed stranger. The young lady noted the trap set by the unknown guy around the building. She tried to get through the defense, but she was never able to do so. Spider-Woman had no way of knowing what kind of magic this stranger had used. Suddenly, she managed to push through the barrier, but it still wouldn't let her in. The little girl approached her embittered sister and suggested that she look for another rich man. But she flatly refused and said it was no longer about money but about her dignity. All the while, Jihu was looking at the Spider-Woman with a smile on his face, which didn't please her. And the guy calmly went to a house that was literally walking, thinking about how lucky he was, because just a few minutes ago he thought he was going to die. Hu couldn't figure out how everything worked, since there was no electricity in the house. But the fridge and kettle and laptop, as well as the lamps, were unplugged. G came to the conclusion that this could only happen with a displaced generator. At this time, electric lines crawled along the walls. The guy assumed they were used to supply power. Consequently, he decided to check and touched one of the sparking lightning bolts, causing him to be electrocuted. The window suddenly flew open, and a stream of energy rushed out. Moments later, the protagonist found himself in the epicenter of an unexplained phenomenon. In the aftermath, the whole house became like a vessel for an enormous amount of energy. It was as if the building had been transformed into a transmitter generating electricity. Opening the cabinets in the kitchen, Jihu noticed the electrified dishes. And if that is indeed the case, the guy is extremely lucky and no one will be able to break into his house. Hu laid down and started playing on the portable console, while an exasperated Chi continued to try in vain to break in. And no matter how much effort the Spider-Woman put in, she still couldn't break the magical barrier. After a while, the protagonist became curious about the stranger's occupation. He went out into the yard and declared that she would not succeed in seducing him, which only made her more angry. At this moment, it glowed with a bright light. Jihu didn't realize what was happening. Suddenly, dozens of strands of web flew from gear, which also failed to penetrate the barrier. However, in doing so, absolutely the entire defense field was shrouded in cobwebs. She muttered that since she couldn't get to him, he couldn't get out now either. Who asked what he had done to mess her up so badly? The girl replied that he had embarrassed her. And will wait until he comes out. The young man wondered if she was born between August and September. The Spider-Woman answered positively, asking a counter-question as to why he was asking. G mouthed that such a pushy girl must be a maiden. Hinting at her innocence, which angered Chi again, the young lady began to say that guys were chasing her in droves. At this time, voices began to come from afar. Someone ordered the spider lair to be surrounded. The main character as well as Chi didn't really understand what was going on. A couple minutes later, they saw a herd of bulls heading in their direction. Who assumed that it was actually coming for her, about a future wedding. One of the beasts kindly greeted the surprised damsel. Then he asked her to go with him to the king to appear at the wedding ceremony. She wondered if they were the same dumb bulls. The leader responded positively, adding that they appeared at the behest of their king to take her to the most beautiful event. But the Spider-Woman refused, declaring that she would never marry their ruler. The bull then ordered his subordinates to immediately capture the girl, saying that Jier is in vain to refuse, for their king is handsome and wealthy enough, and she shouldn't be so testy. She scattered everyone with ease and replied that they were forcibly trying to steal a person and told her about the temper. Then, calling herself a demon, she stared menacingly at their ringleader. Then the Spider-Woman closed her palms and burst into flames. The beast didn't know what to expect from her. A moment later, the maiden generated two identical blades, encouraging the bulls to accept the consequences of their rash actions. Brave Chi immediately threw herself into a fierce battle against the ill-wishers. The girl literally destroyed an entire army of short-sighted demons. However, the bulls in turn were unwilling to back down and continued to resist. What the leader relentlessly urged them to do, the submissive beasts furiously threw themselves into the fray, where Chi, with the help of her web and two swords, left them no chance of success. After a while, the Spider-Woman had absolutely outnumbered the entire demon army. The ringleader looked at his wounded and helpless brethren. After calling them stupid creatures, he glared menacingly at the girl. Bull stated that he was about to show how to act against a self-righteous lady. Chi started to provoke him, but found she was out of cobwebs. Eventually, the maiden was caught, and no matter how hard she tried, she could no longer stand up to the bulls. At that moment, several underlings ran up to her with some sort of accessory. Seconds later, Jier was tied up and a festive kokoshnik put on her head. Then the bull dragged her after him. The little girls tried to wrestle their little sister away from the demon, but could not overpower the huge Verzilla. They began to dig into the legs and arms of the beast to somehow stop the bull. However, the animal simply scattered the defenseless children, taking Chi with it. A satisfied protagonist watched from the window, although he realized that the girl was in danger, but still she tried to kill him. At that moment, the leader of the herd noticed him. He handed the spider to his minions and ordered them to take it to the king. Sam instantly rushed to attack the young lad, however he was unable to do so, since the magical barrier still kept the ill-wishers out. The exasperated beast thrashed in vain against the protective field for several minutes, G watching the bull's futile efforts with a smile on his face. Suddenly, the demon declared that he could not let him live, lest he dishonor the honor of his king. Then he turned to his warriors and ordered them to kill the young man immediately. After a few more minutes of effort, the fighters literally ran out of energy, the enraged bull urging Hu to go outside. This infuriated the beast, who rushed to use his superpower. As a result, he grew considerably in size, and instead of arms, he acquired mighty hooves. Subsequently, the fierce demon rushed to break the protective barrier. But even after gaining incredible power, he couldn't break through the magic field. G unplugged the mouse from the laptop and with a lightning-fast motion of his hand, threw it at the irrepressible demon. Thus, the device turned into a snake as it was a vessel of infinite energy. The mouse rushed at the embittered bull, he in turn rushing to meet it. Before the collision, a bright light spilled out of it that blinded the beast, after which she created a vortex around him as if she was trying to confuse the demon. After a couple seconds, the mouse suddenly threw itself at the bull and tied him up. The beast was dumbfounded, and ordered his statues not to stand still but to kill the young man immediately. Jihu immediately ran for the keyboard and threw it into the crowd of armed bulls. As a result, the buttons became detached and fell on the beast like a meteorite. The mutilated demons, in a fit of anger, declared they would kill him when they caught him. In response, Hu brought out a monitor and was already intending to use it in the resulting confrontation. However, the beast made the only right decision and hurriedly left the given location, stating that their king would come after him. In their haste, they forgot to take Chi with them, whom the sisters hurriedly released. After untangling the spider woman, the little girls began to ask her if she was okay. But the older sister was unconscious, so she couldn't answer. G recommended that they take it home and run warm water over it, and if that didn't help, he had some magic oil. The sisters thanked him for his help and began dragging Chi to the den. Who noticed that it was extremely difficult for them to move around with her. Plus, it had suddenly snowed, and the wind had picked up. In this regard, the guy thought for a long time, but still decided to help the poor girls. Dressed warmer, the main character ran outside and said he would help them get Jier home. He placed the Spider-Woman on his back. One of the girls asked him why Chi never woke up. The young man said she was unconscious. But if she never comes to her senses, he has CPR. Sis asked what it was. Who didn't know how to explain it to her. After that, the talkative girls decided to meet the savior and took turns calling out their names. Chen, Huang, Lu, Xing, and Lan with Z. In a few minutes, they reached the cave, which they hurriedly entered. The sister showed him where to position Jier and acted quite hospitable. Jihu asked if demons like them didn't live only by killing and stealing. The girls replied that they were used to it, adding that there were few rich travelers now, and so they had little food, while giving him a piece of bacon as a token of their gratitude. Who noticed that the meat had long since spoiled. At this moment, the sisters muttered that they wanted to eat. Naturally, he felt sorry for the little ones, so he hurried home for food, asking them to wait a bit. After an hour, the kids thought the young man wouldn't come again, and they scared him. Meanwhile, the main character with a backpack full of provisions and more has just arrived. The sisters were excited to see what he had brought them. The guy started emptying his briefcase, where there was a heater, a lamp for lighting, and blankets with lots of different foods. Also, especially for the little girls, Hu brought out a Barbie doll and gave it to them. It pained him to remember how he wanted to give this toy to his ex-girlfriend. One of the girls thanked him for his concern and grabbed the doll, calling him Big Brother. Sis thought it was food and tried to take a bite. Ji immediately started cooking. At this moment, Jier, whom he greeted, suddenly woke up. While Chi came to her senses and didn't realize what was going on, she didn't pay much attention to Jihu's presence. A couple seconds later, however, the damsel pounced on the young man with claims. The joyful sisters hurried to tell her that he was not their enemy, but on the contrary, Ji helped them. Looking around, the girl found various supplies necessary for daily life. Jier realized that the young man really showed concern for her and her sisters. She approached the guy. Chi then bowed low to him and thanked him for his help. After a while, Jihu prepared a lot of food and offered the girls a snack. The sisters instantly pounced on the table and destroyed everything they had in seconds. Thus, one of them did not have enough food and the baby started crying. The protagonist calmed the child down and got quite a few more provisions out of his backpack. Then, in a rather cozy and family-like atmosphere, they embarked on dinner. Just as Jihu wanted to ask Jier about the place in question, he was interrupted by his little sister. The little girl gave out all the information about Chi, that she was from Dongming Mountain and liked to seduce rich men. Her older sister immediately shut her mouth. Hu stated that he wanted to know about the place he was in. Ji wondered who this bull king was who had sent his minions after her. The kids got ahead of themselves again and answered instead of Jier, saying that he is the king of demons. The young man questioned Chi in surprise. The equally surprised damsel, assuming he knew him. Jihu stated that he had heard about these monsters, the yellow robes, and the Lanruo temple. The Spider-Woman had advised him extremely forcefully to stay away from them, after which the curious Hu inquired about the name of the place. The girls again replied with glee that it was a silk cave, which was basically a guess. Hu ambiguously looked at Jier and gently took her shoulder. Advised not to take as his ally a priest with 100 eyes on his body. After a certain amount of time, they all decided to climb Dongming Mountain together. Seeing the rice dumplings boiling, Hu asked if they intended to steal them. The girl explained that there was a Duanwu festival going on right now, where whoever happened to have a dumpling and egg could ask a favor of Chi. Everyone was in anticipation as they stirred the dumplings, as they were suddenly tossed into the air. The beasts immediately rushed to catch the articles, intending to find a dumpling and egg. But no one has ever been lucky enough to become a winner in this competition. Jier in turn urged everyone to calm down, saying that she will not marry any of them. One of Chi's sisters ran up to Jihu and handed him the coveted dumpling. The guy looked at it suspiciously, then picked it up and tossed it aside. However, he hit the Spider-Woman directly, thus embarrassing both himself and her, because all the animals instantly chased after her in order to get the dumpling. The protagonist realized that she needed help and immediately got on his mighty iron horse. Subsequently, Jier got on a motorcycle and Hu took her to an unknown destination, away from the distraught beasts. One of them demanded that the young man return the dumpling and the maiden, but Ji was already gone. As it turned out later, Chen didn't put eggs in any dumplings, because she simply doesn't like them. Accordingly, Jihu never discovered the egg inside the dumpling, which was quite a shame. Meanwhile, it was getting dark, and the young man wondered if he had crossed the line. After all, from this point on, he has no friends, no internet. In this case, it's good to be an orphan, because no one will worry about him. Earlier, Chi had told him about this world, where in the land of Kunwu, demons fight among themselves for the right to become the ruler of the territories. In the south was the Lanruo Temple, with a 1,000-year-old monster and ghost girls, and the Bull King lives on Mount Sue. The girl was not shy and lapped up the alcohol while simultaneously talking about the predatory continent, as well as the Kunlun Mountain, Imi Park, and the Whitebone Cave with the Dragon Realm. Hu listened intently about the underworld and the Sushang Sword sect. Jai realized that the conflict between immortals and demons was inevitable, and other than the realm of the three heavens, this was where everyone lived. After that, she hurriedly made clothes for her sisters, while the guy digested the information he had received. Jihu didn't know if he was suited for a world full of violence and treasure hunters. After a while, the girl returned tired. Having used up all the silk webbing, the young man asked if she had always lived here with her sisters. Jir replied that it had always been that way. And then, one day, she dreamed about a girl named Mama, calling it fate since she found these girls in the cave. Turning around, she wondered about whose face. The protagonist wiped his tears and said it was okay. The Spider-Woman decided to see if he had a dream. Jihu literally froze in place and hesitated for a moment before speaking rather uncertainly. That he dreams of enjoying and savoring life by staying on Dongming Mountain? Chai in turn wanted to take over a store that sells powder. The young man plunged into his thoughts again and walked to the edge of the mountain they were on and asked what she was dreaming about. Jir replied that she wished for more rich fools to get powder and raise her sisters. Then Hu confessed that he dreams of finding the one and only one and marrying her to start a family like normal people. In response, the girl laughed and muttered that no one would marry him. Heading to his home, Ji was well aware that he couldn't enjoy his life so easily because it was extremely dangerous on Dongming Mountain. And when the monsters would invade him, it was a matter of time, which meant it was necessary to find something that would protect him. And even kitchen appliances and miscellaneous items were quite suitable for protection. Upon entering, however, Jihu found that there was less energy, and the vessels needed it. As a result, it was necessary to find another source of this very energy. The more it was consumed very quickly. The next day, the protagonist ran into the cave to his newfound neighbor and gave her a cosmetic bag, asking him to tell him how to get spiritual energy quickly. She advised Hu to just steal the soul stones that hold her from someone else, either to purchase in the demon city where she and her sisters frequented, to which end she offered Ji to keep them company. The guy agreed. The Spider-Woman noted the rather large backpack on his back. The young man said 2 refrigerators would fit in there. After that, they got on Jihu's mighty motorcycle and set off for Monster City. They were literally floating in the air, gaining tremendous speed. The girl's clothes even started to fall off, and she asked Hu to slow down her bike. After a while, Ji asked where the city was. Chi replied that it was right in front of his nose. As he got closer to the settlement, the protagonist was extremely surprised. Because the town looked more like a regular market, for there was practically nothing but stalls of vendors. Jir had swept up that they were demons, not cultivators, so they would settle for little. Meanwhile, the sisters brought in the rug, and the Spider-Woman began to fancy herself. The young man didn't understand what was wrong and asked her. The girl looked at him, smiled sweetly, and mouthed that she was about to be reincarnated. Suddenly, a coffin appeared, then fell on their knees, began to weep, offering to buy the widow and the 6 girls for a few hundred stones to raise money for the funeral. Ji asked if they make money that way. Chi replied that only travelers can get scammed, because the rest of us know them. At this moment, demons approached them and asked to sell 50 spirit stones. The Spider-Woman immediately chased them away. A frustrated GR remarks that today is clearly not their day, as there are no profits. Hugh in turn tried to calm the girl down, as he would get the stones next year anyway. At this time, a huge demon suddenly flew out of the water like a geyser. The large turtle appeared in front of the surprised crowd. Jihu also didn't understand what was going on. The monster hoped to strike gold, but the other demons tried to counter him. Chai intervened in a timely manner and eliminated one of them. Turtle said that he saw a swordsman on the mountain, who intended to capture Dongming with the foxes from Nanyang Cave. Everyone started asking her what cultivation level this monster had. The turtle assumed that he was of the middle mortal realm. Jier explained to Hu that all demons were divided into levels of different gradations, and that Priest was most likely the strongest of them all. The monsters celebrated their hopelessness, especially since the Spider-Woman had the highest cultivation among them. Turtle muttered that that priest was also very rich and spent 500 stones each on foxes. She immediately urged everyone to find and kill him, adding that she was due 80% of the spoils and they were due 20. The bewildered protagonist asked what to do and how to help. The little sisters dragged their older brother after them, handing him a wooden stick as a weapon. Once deep into the forest, Gur began to slow down and move more cautiously, as if she sensed someone approaching. At this moment, they heard horses galloping in the distance. Chi instantly jumped into the tree, then called all the demons to prepare for a surprise attack. The turtle discovered that the carriage carrying the cultivator from the celestial workshop. It was the demon lord of 1,000 eyes. He had come at the order of the cult to expand the boundaries, which the monster proudly announced. The anxious foxes wondered at him what he wanted to do with them, the lord urging them to be obedient girls. He reached for one of them, but the beauty turned away, asking him to stop acting like that. Jihu had no idea that he would soon meet the one he had only recently told the Spider-Woman about. Turtle swept up that he looked like an 800-year-old cultivator. She urged them not to be afraid of the Lord. The cocky girl rushed toward the demon, but Hu grabbed her leg and told her to take her time. Re-questioning if she really wanted to rob him, Jir stated that the Lord intended to take over Dongming Mountain and therefore had to die. The protagonist noted that she needed to cook a couple chickens initially. The Spider-Woman glanced over to the turtle, after which she had a question for Juan. The beast hesitated at first, as if it didn't know what to say to the girl. Then, rummaging through his things, he showed her a sack of tied chickens. She turned to her fighters and ordered them to attack the arrogant lord. Everyone instantly snapped out of their seats, rushing towards the demon. The smiling lord, in turn, offered Jir to be his little sister. In response, the Spider-Woman threw a mountain of webbing over him to restrain him in his actions. The other demons hurriedly surrounded the monster, thus taking it by surprise. One of Chie's sisters had clued in to the fact that their older brother had warned them about meeting this monster. All the monsters wished to destroy the lord while Jir was giving out orders. Some she asked to stun the demon, others to go around the back. It was a tactic of sorts. Thirds were required to use healing magic to restore health to the warriors. All in all, it was like a computer game. It seemed the Lord's end had come, because all the beasts were delivering extremely painful blows every second. For a while, they beat the helpless Lord successfully enough. The demon, in turn, could no longer stand on his feet and fell to his knees, the ground beneath him literally cracking at the seams. Suddenly, one of the blows hit him in the head. Blood began to pour all over his face, and then the monster became angry. The monster shouted loudly. They forced him to take extreme measures. Some of the beasts began to scatter in different directions. Jihu warned them of this demon's secret technique, urging them to be on their guard. At that moment, the spider swooped down on him with another attack, but the Lord suddenly exposed his torso. With its bright light, it literally blinded the surrounding beasts. There were dozens of eyes on its body. No one could understand what it was. The sisters closed their eyes in fear. At this time, Hu threw a sack of chickens at the Lord and urged the beast not to retreat. The demon was puzzled, whereupon Chi instantly threw another batch of webs over him. The dumbfounded monster asked the young lad how he knew about it. The Jir sisters responded instead of their older brother, saying it didn't matter, and death awaited him. The protagonist turned his attention to the beast behind him and ordered them to immediately attack the Lord. The demons eventually began to do so, but the cultivator skillfully dealt with them. The monster actively used his abilities in confronting them. The beasts decided to simultaneously attack him from different directions. Thus, they pinned him to the ground, after which the others piled on top of him. The Lord seemed to be defeated. A moment later, however, he turned into a huge scolopendra-like insect and got out with ease. The beasts started scattering around in fear, which didn't please the Spider-Woman. Jir ordered them not to cower and to go on the attack, assuring them that they had a chance to overpower him. But what was happening said otherwise. The Lord was destroying the demons with lightning-fast movements one by one. The monsters still tried to resist him, but the cultivator surpassed them in strength. The injured animals demanded that the healers heal them immediately. But the healers had run out of all energy and health regeneration was impossible. Then a spider swarmed into the fray, but even she couldn't do enough damage to the Lord. Jumping back, she noted that this demon was extremely strong and would not be able to handle him so easily. They also had no healing pills due to their high cost. There seemed to be no chance of success. The monster, in turn, felt his superiority and only pushed them harder. Chai was contemplating whether to use her secret technique. At that moment, Jihu called out to them. The young man stated that he could create healing capsules with the right ingredients. However, Jir sadly muttered that he'd better take Sizzi with him and run away. He replied that he had a pill furnace, whereupon the guy started looking for it in his bottomless backpack. Finally, Ji pulled out something that looked like a pot. Chie noticed that it wasn't an alchemical furnace, but some sort of pot. The young man objected, calling it an electric rice cooker, even though it really is like a pot. The girl pointed out the capsule oven would have to be huge, who objected again, assuring her that they could cook in small ones too. Spider-Woman said a fire is needed, Jihu explained. The furnace is electric and doesn't need one. Meanwhile, the Lord was tearing apart the remnants of the demon army, which meant they wouldn't last long. The protagonist demanded that Chi give him the necessary ingredients. Jir immediately handed them to him, and the guy put everything in the rice cooker. After a while, the mobile oven went up in smoke without cooking anything. Chi freaked out and ordered the young man to take her sisters and get out of here immediately. However, Jihu did not listen to her and waited for the preparation of the pills. Hu was sure that in order to successfully brew the capsules, more time was needed. After a few minutes, the rice cooker did indeed signal that the pods were ready. Opening it, they found colorful pills. Jir was shocked. Taking one, she wondered how he managed to do it with a stove that wasn't a real stove. At that moment, a wounded demonic bear landed at their feet with a clatter. The Spider-Woman hurriedly gave him one of the capsules, which lifted him to his feet in a moment. After that, the enraged and full of strength beast grabbed a huge stone and headed towards the Lord. Chai was dumbfounded by this pill effect and couldn't understand what had happened to him. At this time, the demon attacked the cocky monster with a cobblestone in his hands. Geyer asked G if they were definitely healing capsules. The youngster replied that they were special capsules, and it all depended on the character of the person taking it. The Spider-Woman realized that he himself did not know what kind of pill would be prepared, which was what Hu asked. But at that moment, a wounded beast flew to them. She said sadly that the boar's wounds were much more serious than the bear's were. The maiden immediately handed out the right ingredients to the guy to prepare some more capsules. After a couple of minutes, they took out a suspiciously colored pill from the rice cooker, not knowing its properties. But there wasn't much of a problem with that, after all. They weren't the ones who would accept her. After that, Jir opened the demon's mouth and Jihu shoved a capsule down its throat. After a couple seconds, the distraught monster flew into the air and its wounds instantly healed. The boar himself had gained unprecedented power, which he felt a moment later. The beast immediately pounced with a series of attacks on the bewildered lord, demanding that the flower demon be released. The cultivator barely had time to fend off the lightning-fast blows of the rampaging boar. Releasing the flower monster from his hands, he began to confront the ferocious beast. Jihu observed that while wounded, the beast was extremely effective at fighting the lord. Meanwhile, Chi remembered about these capsules that reduce yang. The protagonist didn't understand what the Spider-Woman was talking about and interrogated her. Jir explained that although these capsules are better than the healing capsules, and their effects are amazing, they affect male strength. He began to ponder and afterwards realized exactly what the girl meant and was horrified. The flower demon cheered fiercely for the boar and declared that if he won this fight, she would marry him. However, the monster noted that after dealing with the Lord, he would marry Chi, which she personally highly doubted. The bear in turn didn't like the fact that all the glory might go to the boar. All the more reason he didn't want to let on that Chi and the flower demon might have fallen in love with this pig. The rest of the animals shared the opinion of the leper and rushed with him into battle. Ji asked Jir where she got so many ingredients if she didn't have any money. The damsel replied that she scrounged them up. Meanwhile, the Lord continued to scatter some of the mutants, the Spider-Woman hurriedly handing out a new batch of pills to the fighters. She had noticed that some beasts had greatly increased their strength with the help of these capsules. The turtle is extremely slow by nature, but with the pill it became incredibly fast. It's worth noting that there were also those who had gained the magical abilities of lightning and fire. But some were much less fortunate, for it depended on the person receiving them. Jir fed a huge number of monsters with capsules and ordered them to kill the Lord. The beasts began to do the same, inflicting tangible damage on a demon that was no longer so powerful. At a certain point, an angry bear came to their aid, who nailed the wounded beast to the ground with another boulder. Everyone watched in amazement. It seemed the Lord could not survive. However, suddenly he dived into the ground. You would have thought he had decided to retreat. But the demon actually intended to attack the protagonist, which is what the boar thought. He shouted to G to run away immediately. The guy was perplexed. A couple seconds later, a monster came out of the ground and tried to attack the young man, but Hu managed to bounce back. Then threw a mouse and keyboard at him, which tied him up and did quite a bit of damage. From a powerful mutant lord, he's turned into a victim. His body suddenly took on a human form, the defeated demon lying on the ground. But still finding its strength, the embittered monster once again rushed to attack Jihu. Spider-Woman realized she had to save the lad, and as soon as the Lord tried to hit the youngster, the inexplicable happened. G poured the usual milk on it. Subsequently, the perplexed behemoth froze in place. No matter how hard he tried, the demon couldn't move and didn't realize what had happened. As a result of which, he gradually started to turn stone. Everyone was shocked and also didn't understand what Who had done. The protagonist in turn doused him once more with milk to make sure the petrification worked. She asked him how he turned it into stone and what the liquid was. Jihu replied, "It was milk with melamine. And he found it at home when he was cleaning. Eventually, the expired milk became a magical item." The beasts immediately began searching the defeated lord and found a certain ring. He also had a letter with him. Jir tried to read it but couldn't do so. The monsters looked at the girl extremely surprised. She asked why they were looking at her like that. Who asked if she couldn't read. She said it didn't matter. The guy instantly snatched the letter from her and started studying it. From the letter, it was learned that the Lord Master of the two snakeheads of the Taoist Federation and the head had ordered him to take over the place. After which the young man asked if any of them knew about this federation. All of them silently shook their heads. Spider-Woman yanked the piece of paper out of his hands and tore it up, saying that it didn't matter. What mattered was the sky carriage. The beast decided to strip the beaten lord naked and began pulling down his pants. Then the rest of the stuff, trying to find something interesting or expensive. Meanwhile, Who got thirsty and started drinking expired milk. Chi was perplexed and asked the spirits of the forest to check on the guy to see if he was okay. Ji showed them his purple tongue. The next morning, the protagonist woke up in his house and went about his usual business. He didn't even have to do anything as a flying brush brushed his teeth and a towel wiped his face. Suddenly, Jihu heard the noise of the crowd and he was curious as to what was going on. The young man looked out the window and found a huge line of people outside his house, where Chi collected 10 soul stones per entry, and those out of line who wanted to pass had to pay 20. At that moment, Who came out to her and asked what she was doing. As it turned out, Jir had set up a business for him, making pills. And since he needs magic stones, he will start selling magic capsules. Ji stated his low skill level in pill creation. The Spider-Woman explained that there were few people in their world who knew how to make them. So he better not lose this chance to make money, especially since he can sell them at triple the price. However, Who said that his capsules depend on who takes them, and he is not responsible for the effect. Jihu set about preparing a capsule to visualize what he was telling them. After a while, the main character brought out his rice cooker and started making pills, adding that under normal circumstances you could create a few pieces, but like this you'd have to count on luck. But to the guy's surprise, the capsule was still successfully cooked. The boar remarked that he was doing well. The young man called it pure luck. After which he pronounced that the next one would definitely fail to create. However, the pill was prepared. This time it was blue in color. Chi said that it could be used to increase energy. The beast began to say that such a treasure could be worth even 500 stones, while Ji didn't understand why there was never a single failure. After waiting a few more minutes for the rice cooker to smoke, Who thought that there was no way to create a medicine now. But the furnace managed to surprise them by preparing hundreds of different pills, which the beast began to collect. Then the boar decided to try his luck as well. But other than the energy-restoring capsules, nothing worked. But after trying it once more, he had created a pill of easy gate for which he could have purchased an entire house. The demon thanked the guy and Jihu hurriedly went home, asking the others to come back the next day. Since the young man was tired, he decided to take some time out in nature and roast some meat. In general, Chi and Who enriched themselves on the pills. And with the stones, Ji was going to raise the level of one of his magic items. But what exactly to choose he didn't know. After a little thinking, the young man still decided. And he decided to improve his furnace, believing that in this way he would create better quality pills. The protagonist applied magic runes to the rice cooker, and it glowed dramatically. However, nothing happened. Who realized that more stones were needed and tossed more. Suddenly, a strong wind came up, and then a mighty whirlwind formed, whirling the furnace in the air. A moment later, a mobile oven fell into Ji's hands in a slightly different guise. At this time, a group of unknown people flew towards him, standing on swords. The young man suspected something wrong. The girl asked Who if he had seen a Taoist in a yellow robe named Thousand-Eyed Demon. Confused, the guy hesitated to answer, but afterward he still said he hadn't met such a thing. The young man then instantly ran to his bike, realizing that they were now in trouble. However, the damsel guessed that he had tricked her and rushed to attack Jai. She released her hairpins at him from her hair, which felt like a meteorite falling from the sky. At this moment, a cloud suddenly formed behind her and a strange voice spoke. The unknown man started mumbling something inaudible. They didn't realize who it was. Turning around, the girl noticed the silhouette of the demon, who inquired if she had a suitor. A moment later, a young fellow appeared before her with a fan and a certain book in his hands. He greeted her graciously, stating that they were destined to meet, and asked if she was married. The stranger replied rather rudely that it was none of his business, but the young man persisted. Suddenly, the fan fell out of his hand, the unknown man reacting rather strangely to this. After which, he suddenly grabbed her arm. The girl didn't realize what was going on. The guy spouted off that he was quite handsome and rich, and with him she would know no sorrow. Watching from the sidelines, the main character remarks that this is the first time he's seen such a crazy marriage proposal. Finally, the lady disentangled herself from the embrace of the annoying young man and pulled a bobby pin out of her hair. She immediately threw a spike at him. However, he managed to dodge. The warriors immediately pointed their blades at him, accusing him of flirting with their peach orchard maiden. As a result, the wizards rushed to attack the much misunderstood stranger. Dozens of swords flew towards him, but the youngster dodged them quite skillfully. One of the blades still hit the unknown man's notebook, and it literally crumbled in his hands. Then snakes came into the fray and bit him, thereby tearing his clothes. The smiling young man was furious, his eyes blazing with fire. After that, the guy dealt with all the snakes pretty quickly, and after a second of using his powers, he increased in size and appeared as a huge demon, hurried to attack the hapless warriors. The frightened damsel in turn tried to escape. Jumping on her sword, she flew off into the distance. But the irrepressible stranger managed to catch her. He said she wouldn't get away from him so easily. The lady declared that even if he got her body, he would never get her heart. The guy tied her up and implied that no one is interested in a woman's heart. After calling her his 16th wife, the unknown man took the girl away with him. Ji was well aware that this demon was clearly stronger than those he had met along the way. And to avoid getting caught in the hot hand, the protagonist rode his motorcycle home. However, after driving a couple of meters, he was stopped by the same stranger, who decided to pretend that he liked the young man's marriage proposal. Adding that it was the best offer he'd seen, the guy remarked, extremely displeased with the lady in his arms. Jihu muttered that she simply did not understand her happiness, for his words contained romance and realism, with a hint of savagery. Also, the young man extremely successfully combined classicism and modernism. In general, Ji praised it as much as he could. The man's commented that he didn't know what he was talking about, but it sounded really good, accepting that no one appreciates his kindness, which is the key to seduction. Hu had no choice but to approve of the stranger's words. Suddenly the guy hugged Ji and declared that he was the only one who understood him. The young man then tied the girl to a tree and hastened to propose to the other, and Jihu would explain to him if she did not appreciate his exertions. Climbing on the cloud, they headed to the spider cave. The man said that last time a certain kid had stopped him from seducing Chi. The main character realized it was about him and asked what his name was. The guy proudly called Bull, the Demon King. According to legend, the bull was married to Princess Feng, but lately he has been lonely, for his wives run away from him every time. He started complaining to Hu that his 8th wife had run off with a turtle. Ji tried his best to calm the guy down. Bull mumbled that he had heard that girls liked scientists, so he dressed accordingly. Meanwhile, the worried beasts, by the sudden disappearance of the young man, expressed their displeasure to Chi, for they need pills. Flying closer to the cave, the bull noticed that Gur had become much prettier since their last encounter. A moment later, the bull and Hu landed near the spider's lair. The girl didn't understand why Ji was beside him. The young suitor decided to read his poem to the girl, where he professed his love for her. However, no one was able to appreciate it, realizing that poetry is clearly not his thing. The pushy bull still asked if the Spider-Woman would be willing to marry him. Jir replied that it would never happen. Suddenly, Shu said that her sister already likes one guy. The young man became furious. At this point, the other SIS declared that this man is Hu because Chi is always admiring the mirror he gave her. The little girl mumbled that Jir had knitted him clothes from her web. Whereupon the little pest showed her sewn-up panties to the enraged bull. All the animals were shocked and looked at the Spider-Woman in surprise, Chi in turn noting that she had merely sewn his underwear. The little sister pointed her finger at the main character and pronounced that he was Ji's brother. Bull was desperate, realizing he had been tricked, and even began to imagine them together. Jihu tried to calm him down and assured him that they were just friends and he had misunderstood everything. But the embittered demon said he had no right to be called a brother after that. After which he took out his axe and rushed to attack the young Casanova. However, Hugh's motorcycle saved his life by riding over the distraught bull. Ji in turn grabbed hold of the bike and hurriedly eliminated himself, saying he could explain everything to him. But the monster would not listen to him and turned into a huge and strong bull. The guy realized there was no point in explaining himself at this point and tried to escape. The enraged bull in turn threw an axe in his direction, who managed to dodge. However, the gun followed him, the surprise protagonist speeding up. The axe was cutting down all the trees in its path, chasing G. The guy assumed the bull was from the axe gang. Spidey watched from the sidelines and realized he needed help. Chai urged the beast to help him, but they refused. The girl implied that if the bull killed him, there would be no more pills. It was only then that the demon stirred, trying to stop the embittered monster. But the mutant king and Jihu were already far away, and catching up with them was impossible. Meanwhile, Hu advised the bull to find Feng in a cave in the south of the continent, which pissed off an already pissed off horned demon even more. At this moment, he began to actively use his abilities. The young man didn't realize what was happening. Seeing the bull's transformation, Chi urged Ji to be extremely careful. Moments later, the monster turned into a large cow, which was a rather odd decision. Hugh in turn laughed at such a transformation, the beast remarking that he had a close connection to a distant cow clan in the west. A smiling Jihu congratulated him heartily and hurried away. But the cow caught up with him in seconds and hit his bike, which the guy in no way expected. Subsequently, the bike and the protagonist went tumbling to the ground. The motorcycle hit the ground in a characteristic manner and flew into the air, with an extremely dangerous flight path. As the machine flew straight at Ji, Chi became nervous and called out to him worriedly. Hugh managed to brace himself against the rock, but the motorcycle barricaded him and the guy got stuck. Jier used the web to try to push the transport away. In the meantime, the bull was getting closer and shouting insulting phrases threateningly at the young man. Running up to him, the angry demon wanted revenge for his lover. At that moment, something flew at him, but the monster managed to dodge. Turning around, he turned his attention to the unknown flying machine, which began to literally suck him inside. The bull couldn't resist this incomprehensible magic. Finally, the rice cooker pulled the monster in and closed the lid, at which time the boar helped the guy out from under the bike. Imprisoned in a blazing prison, the beast demanded that Hu release it immediately. The protagonist decided to teach the horny monster a lesson and raise the temperature in the furnace. After which the rice cooker smoked, all the demons breathed a sigh of relief. She asked why the bull had said he had betrayed him. Ji explained the whole situation about the Taoists coming to these parts and the appearance of the horned beast. At that moment, Jihu remembered the maiden tied to a tree in the forest and suggested that the beast drag her here. There were a great many who wished to rescue the girl, in view of which they instantly rushed into the forest. After a while, the monsters returned, but still couldn't find anyone. The young man thought they had already come for her. Jir stated that they would kill anyone who set foot on their land, who urged her to be careful, for this federation was extremely dangerous. Suddenly, their dialogue was interrupted by the hungry sisters asking when they would have lunch. At this time, Chi noticed a cicada coming out of the rice cooker, which she told the guy about. Jihu turned around and saw the insect abruptly snap off the stove and fly away. After which, turned into a bull, he stood proudly on his cloud, his eyes pouring blood. At a certain point, the demon rushed to attack. Ji miraculously managed to escape, as Jir used her web to pull him aside. The other animals, however, were much less fortunate. They took the bull's strongest blow upon themselves. Even the mountains seemed to shudder along with the ground and trees. As soon as the monster approached Hu, the young man raised the rice cooker above his head. The demon was unwilling to return to the 100-degree prison and hurriedly escaped. As he left, he said that he would soon regain his strength, and next time he would come with a whole army. And the spider beast advised the beast to prepare for their wedding ceremony, after which she would become his 17th wife. The boar answered for everyone that he would never get Chi's hand in marriage in his life. He then asked Li to inform the Wolf King on Mount Wangwu to send his warriors to their aid. It was also necessary to engage all the allies from various places on the continent. They even came up with a name for their murderous squad, calling themselves the Defenders of Chi. Ji has picked up on the fact that she has quite a large number of fans because everyone admires her. Thus, in December in the year 839, the demons and spirits announced that they needed to protect Jir. Kings and generals from different regions came to their aid, in the form of a lion, a bear, and a snake and shrimp. The lion and the snake immediately began to work out which of them was more suited to be the spider's husband. The king of the serpent remarked that a lion can't even write a love letter properly. The lion in turn realized that it was General Shrimp who dared to open his letter and threw himself at him with his fists. The protagonist urged them to calm down, for they would kill each other before the bull army arrived. But they paid no attention to him, and the young man decided to get away from these silly creatures, and noticed Chi playing with her little sisters, chasing them around the clearing by the lake. Jir saw Jihu hiding behind a tree and called out to him. The guy walked over to her, who once again noted the amazing loyalty of all the demons who were even willing to give their lives for her. The girl replied that she had known the pig for a long time. They had met when she had helped him handle 2 trees. The serpent she had known since his awakening. At that moment, she took the blow for herself. Lion was almost from childhood because his parents abandoned him for unknown reasons. Ji asked what she had done to help General Shrimp. Jier smiled, after which she replied that Shrimpy was simply in love with her, and had been for quite some time. At that moment, the boar came up to them and mouthed that he would always protect her, and was grateful for everything. Shrimp, on the other hand, reminded Chi once again that the only thing missing for their wedding was her consent, at which point someone slapped him. As a result of which a fight broke out again, in order to find out which of them is a more worthy claimant to the beauty. Meanwhile, Jihu suggested that the Spider-Woman move to another place where they could live next door to each other. The girl pointed out that it's not as easy as it seems, because wherever they go, everywhere is very dangerous. The protagonist said quite sincerely that he would feed her when she and her sisters ran out of food. Then rephrased that he meant help with provisions, not what she might have thought. However, Chi stated that she didn't need his help, even blushing herself. At this time, a beaten boar literally crawled out of a 2-hour scuffle with the beasts. Hu asked him if he could really defeat the bull with his army. The demon hesitated, and the guy realized that there were doubts after all. He explained that the king's power was too great, but there was a powerful lady living on the mountain of white bone who could help them. As a result, they traveled towards the mysterious woman. At this moment, huge bone fangs suddenly grew out of the ground. Ji instantly gave a hoot and they sped off into the distance. As it turned out, large skeletons were running after them. The boar in turn began to drive the young man on, for his bride-to-be Kihua was waiting for him. After escaping from the demons, they passed through the ominous wastelands. Who couldn't understand why she lived in such a strange place? Jihu asked if she would definitely help them. The demon replied that it all depended on her mood. As they approached the foot of the cliff, they saw a corpse hanging from a tree with a sign that said he had disturbed the peace and paid for it. The boar had gotten the idea that if she was in good spirits, she'd be fine. In a few minutes, they had climbed the long ladder and were standing opposite the entrance to the cave. Suddenly, the boar ran away, saying he needed to go back to Chi and help her. Before he left, he called out the name of the ruler of these lands. Her name was Shiji. The lad remembered that this lady had once been burned. He had no choice but to continue his journey alone. He was met by guards at the entrance. They asked who he was. Hu said that he came from Dongming Mountain. Without letting him finish, the warriors pointed the way to the overlord. Ji headed down the dark and cold corridors of the cave looking for Shiji. There were plenty of human remains around, which created a rather creepy atmosphere. At a certain point, Jihu reached a room with a green glow and stepped inside. Where there was a long line waiting for the enchantress to appear, the young man could not understand why such pandemonium had formed. A moment later, the guards brought out the royal palanquin. Everyone began to say it was her. The warriors set the palanquin on the ground and stepped back, after which there was a sepulchral silence. For a while, all the demons just waited silently for Shiji's orders. Suddenly, a female voice spoke out that she was in no mood, and as such, she ordered the guards to kill everyone with even numbers in their queue. The humans obediently fulfilled the whim of their ruler. The monsters were perplexed and said it was unfair. Everyone was then called to silence immediately to greet Lady Shiji. The girl opened the curtain and appeared in front of the waiting demons. She was nonchalantly lying on the bed and eating cookies, Jihu's first time observing such a picture. The overlady cast her gaze at the monsters as she continued to ostentatiously eat the sweets. One of the guards plucked up courage and rebuked her for the image in which she appeared before everyone. It didn't take long for Shiji to react. The damsel literally went into a frenzy, stating that she hadn't seen the sun in years. At this moment, lightning bolts rained down from the heavens on the mountain. They pierced the cave and several demons with guards electrocuted. The protagonist managed to hide behind a rock with one of the frightened monsters. Who mouthed that the legend turned out to be true? She wondered what he was talking about. Beast explained that she once experienced some sort of deviation of ki and her personality split, which is why Shiji is so unpredictable. Who assumed that she was Earth level and most likely afraid to go out in public, as she was unable to control her emotions. At that moment, one of the lightning bolts struck the demon who told the legend. The lady in turn spewed lightning bolts. One of the guards quickly gave her the medicine. And after a couple seconds she felt better, the girl stopped freaking out and went back to her bed. Afterwards, she apologized to everyone present, remarking that she was having an extremely hard time controlling herself. After eating a cookie, she summarized that she gets these things, so she shouldn't pay attention to it. At this time, a demon fearfully approached her and gave her a certain item. Shiji stated that he would get no help from her for this item. adding that she doesn't need money and whoever cheers her up within 15 minutes, that's who she'll help. There were no one willing to be the first clown for Mistress, causing Shay to say that if she counted to 3 and no one started. Suddenly she was interrupted by one of the beasts, and declared that he would be the first to try and cheer her up. However, the anecdote he started to tell was absolutely not funny, moreover boring and rather long. Without waiting for the tale to end, the Lordess ordered several arrows to be fired at him, which the guards eventually did. The others had even less desire to surprise the princess. Pointing her fingers at one of the demons, the girl ordered him to make her laugh. The next applicant for pardon failed this examination at the cost of his life, for he began to dance ridiculously. The obedient warriors immediately led the loser out of the cave and eliminated him. The next lucky person stated that he had learned a folk song and was going to show her his talent. Shiji didn't even give him a start, as she had already ordered her Verzillas to rid themselves of his presence. The other fell at her feet and sobbing said that he could only do tricks. The princess was once again saddened and killed the monster, calling them all rather boring. She then pointed to the main character and said it was his turn to amuse the ruler. Jihu pretended he didn't realize who she was saying it to and asked her again in a shaky voice. The insolent and arrogant damsel declared that he had 10 seconds in which to cheer her up. Hu was literally covered in sweat because of excitement. He didn't know any jokes, songs, or dances. As the young man pondered how he would get out of the situation, Shiji noted that time was up, after which she called the guards to kill the talentless fellow. Ji urged them to wait. The warriors were puzzled, but still decided to give him one last chance. Hu started frantically searching for something in his bottomless backpack, not knowing if it would help in this case or not. After a minute, the protagonist pulled a laptop out of his bag and showed it to the finicky woman. The guards asked what it was. The guy replied, "It's a laptop." The servant brought Jihu a chair and watched closely what the young man was doing. Hu decided to put on a famous video game, hoping it would work and entertain Shai. He handed her a joystick and took another one for himself and started telling her the rules of the game, where they have to control 2 characters and fight various evil things. After showing her which buttons to push, the guy asked her to imagine that these people were cultivators. However, while killing enemies and dodging traps, Shiji became so engrossed that she began to nervously click on all the buttons. The girl was literally getting turned on. Ji immediately urged her to calm down, muttering that she had 3 lives and could always start over. A certain amount of exciting game time passed, but Shay wasn't doing much. One of the guards had the indiscretion to ask her for a joystick to help her, and paid for it. Not at all virtual life. The ruler let lightning at him, and the warrior collapsed to the ground. While doing so, Shiji was hitting the buttons pretty fast and hard. The guy asked her not to do that since he only had 2 joysticks. Especially even if she loses, Ji can give her her character with 3 lives. What happened in a couple of minutes? The girl demanded his joystick. The young man naturally gave it to her. But she managed to mess up here too. The angry person started saying that she had been cultivating for over 3,000 years, and this was some kind of game. The protagonist immediately calmed her down by telling her that he had a way out of the situation. After that, he took the joystick and put out 30 more lives so she'd have enough for sure. The already pleased lady muttered that he should have done it much sooner. Jihu estimated that they now had 59 lives for the 2 of them, and that should be enough. The involved mistress continued to hit the buttons vigorously and eventually began to make progress. Still, she is a powerful demon who rules over a mountain of ghosts in the eastern lands. At this time, another guard started handing out advice to her. Shay ordered everyone to shut up, and after a few minutes, she successfully finished the game by completing all the levels, which she shouted happily about. Upon exiting the game, she found other files on her desktop and asked what they were. Jihu replied that this game wasn't working, and she should start with something easier. The guy asked how she was feeling. The girl was excited about going through the video game. Shai even deigned to pay him 3,000 magic stones, but Hu muttered that he had one request for her. The smiling ruler said she would fulfill his every wish, within reason of course. Ji called himself a cultivator from the Spider Cave that is located on Dongming Mountain. And recently a bull with a huge army came to him from Mount Kwaivi, a bull with a huge army to wreak havoc, and within 3 days he will return. Shiji stated that it was an easily solvable problem, and he could handle the little upstart, offering the guy 2 developments to resolve this issue. The first option only works temporarily, and the other is beneficial to everyone. Shai can send an army and give magic items, or find elixirs with which they can deal with the bull. But that takes time, plus you have to get to Emi Peak where she lost hers. The protagonist agreed to go to Emi Peak in search of magic elixirs. He took his backpack and left. Shiji had purposely sent him to get potions, so she could play in peace on her beloved laptop. Jihu waded through many obstacles to the much-needed elixirs, and even almost died when he tried to climb Ime Peak. The guy managed to grab onto a dangling tree. After a while, with a lot of effort, the young man was still able to climb the mountain. From where the view was stunning, Hu couldn't take his eyes off this beauty. Suddenly, the amulet Shiji had given him led him. The boy chased after it in a rush. Just as Ji remembered his iron partner, he heard the sound of an engine. Turning around, the protagonist found a motorcycle and was more than happy to get on the bike. After which I followed the magic amulet. Naturally, the path became much easier. After a few minutes, the amulet led him to an unknown temple that supposedly held elixirs. At that moment, Jihu heard extraneous sounds. As it turned out, it was the Taoists. They flew their swords and landed near a mysterious building. The young man thought it would be nice if a bull showed up now and started pestering her to take the elixirs without a problem. One of them seemed to hear the guy and turned in his direction but never found anyone. Since Hu had covered himself with the branches of a tree in an extremely timely manner, the presence of the Taoists was quite suspicious. After they entered the temple, Ji decided to eavesdrop on their conversation and took off his headphones. He guided them through the air straight into the building, and moments later they stealthily made their way inside. Besides being able to hear what the sectarians were talking about, Jihu could also see what was going on inside. An unidentified damsel called for silence from everyone ahead of a major talk by the two-headed snake of the Taoist Federation. After which she asked the immortal head of the Eastern Branch named Qijiao to greet her. A dimensional and muscular man with a beard walked defiantly toward them. He was immediately offered a drink of tea. The immortal tipped his cup and thanked him. After which he mouthed that this year's planned gathering had begun, and he was grateful for their efforts, adding that the last year has been really fertile, and with the help of the Federation and teamwork, they have made progress. Qijiao pronounced that there are three most important things to be aware of. The people in turn were delighted and applauded him, shouting the master's name. Vladika continued that each topic includes 6 subtopics, which are divided into 12 points. Qijiao's tale was indeed too tedious, and the warriors began to fall asleep. The head of the Eastern Branch understood this perfectly well, and as such he stopped his narration. The girl noticed that the immortal's speech was impressive, and hastened to add on her own behalf. People grabbed their heads again, assuming the moral would stretch on for hours, but she turned the conversation to the distribution of the annual bonus. Naturally, everyone became animated and eager to know what reward was due to them. The master waved his hand and the snake's eyes lit up. At this moment, a long python got out and hovered in the air, impressing the people. Meanwhile, the main character's magic amulet suddenly flew towards the temple. Who assumed that the elixirs were inside the long python? Qijiao swept up that this python was filled with elixirs and various materials from bones to flesh. People were delighted with this gift, and thanked the master for his generosity. The cultivator said he grabbed this snake when he passed by Imi Peak, all thanks to the Federation leader and his extremely helpful instructions. One of the warriors asked how they would divide these rewards. Qijiao said there was no problem. Then, taking more air into his lungs, the head blew out the fire he had enveloped the python in, since it was necessary to get the flame elixir. After a while, the kite hovered in the air, ending up in a distinctive vessel. The master continued to fuel it with fire. The python in turn began to hiss, then spit out some long-awaited elixirs. The people were impressed with what was going on. Suddenly, the snake was embraced by a magical ball that seemed to keep out fire. The head noted that this monster lived for about 1,000 years. Hu also wanted to get his hands on the magic potions. But if he steals them, he will anger the Federation. However, not doing so will make it difficult to defeat the bull. Ji was well aware that attacking directly wasn't a good idea. It was necessary to divert their attention. Especially they have a lot of powerful warriors, also an immortal cultivator. The protagonist climbed the stairs and pondered his next plan of action. Meanwhile, the python's resistance had greatly decreased, and Qijiao called out for everyone to help him. The warriors also directed their fire abilities at the unresisting python. The head of the Eastern Branch muttered that there wasn't much left. At a certain point, the foreman heard extraneous sounds, not realizing what was happening. The helper immediately did a reconnaissance with her paper airplane. But after flying around the vicinity of the temple, no one could be found. People thought it was a ghost. Qijiao headed towards the exit to check in person. As he approached the front doors, he heard a voice talking about some kind of delivery. With a lightning-fast movement of his hand, the head destroyed the door, but he didn't see anyone behind it, which was rather odd. The master muttered that the one who had decided to play them a brave fool and ordered the stranger to appear. The girl found an unknown box on the stairs and showed it to Qijiao. It was from her that this voice came, talking about some packages. The head didn't understand what was going on. After a moment, he realized that they had been deliberately lured outside, and as such, he hurried back into the temple. At that time, Jihu threw a bomb inside the building. After the explosion, everyone got stained with expired milk. Accordingly, they were petrified and unable to move. Chi was perplexed, while Hu absolutely calmly flew his bike into the room and took the elixirs, claiming that it belonged to him. He had an electric glove that could utilize magical energy, which made it easier. The protagonist then released a python from the vessel to act as a hindrance to the Taoists. It was as if the guy had ordered the snake to hurry up so he wouldn't be caught by the Federation people. At this moment, the enraged Qi Jiao shattered the stone shell and rushed towards the young man. The master spewed a huge amount of flames that enveloped the entire building. Hu guffawed that he was just delivering a package. It's worth noting that Ji's fiction in the form of a milk bomb has proven quite effective in practice. The embittered head could not accept defeat and followed the insolent man. He literally summoned a meteor that incinerated and destroyed all living things, yet Jihu managed to dodge. Engaging their blades as air transportation, the Taoists continued to pursue the lad. The immortal cultivator tried his best to stop the young man, shouting threats at him. The protagonist, in turn, rushed forward, scattering the warriors on the way with his motorcycle. Meanwhile, before the bike's transformation was fully loaded, there was only 10% left. Hu threw a mouse at the cultivator, catching up with him, which subsequently tied him up at the hands and feet of Qi Jiao. However, the head easily severed the cord. Ji swept up that it was a gift from his ex-girlfriend. The angered master menacingly declared that with such low-level tricks he couldn't escape. After that, he started using flame magic. The guy in turn used the keyboard with the damage buttons. But Qi Jiao burned them to the ground with his fire fist, which was another dangerous skill of the chapter. At that moment, the transformation load came to an end, and the motorcycle shattered into small parts. An overconfident Jihu asked the foreman if he had ever seen dodge batlax. The dazed immortal cultivator didn't understand what was happening or what to expect from the youngster. A couple seconds later, the parts of the motorcycle began to come together rapidly, then finally transformed into an incredibly powerful and beautiful motorcycle. Ji's point is that such a bike costs a fortune and is the fastest machine in the world. Qi Jiao instantly ignited, showing off his transformation. Turning into a dragon, the head confidently declared that he would tear the boy apart. Hu in turn turned the motorcycle around and ran over the immortal, thus throwing him aside. The cultivator tried to attack him, but Jihu was already several dozen meters away from him. The others came to the head to help. Qi Jiao noted the guy's speed. After all, even celestial unicorns weren't that fast. Holding the mouse in her hands, the girl came to the conclusion that this item needed to be studied as it was an amazing weapon. The master from the eastern branch was spitting blood at this time from excessive rage. The immortal then turned into a meteor to catch up with the protagonist. Qi Jiao demanded Hu stop, but the daredevil had a different opinion on the matter. Ji let out a puff of smoke from his pipe, thus delaying the ferocious cultivator while he himself soared into the sky. The head accused him of cowardice because the insolent man is always running away rather than taking a fair fight. Suddenly, Jihu disappeared, turning into thunder before appearing next to the maiden and snatching the mouse from her. Even though he had broken up with an ex-girlfriend, he cared a lot about the subject. The exasperated cultivator asked the assistant if she knew where the insolent man had come from. The Taoist replied that this guy called his brother a bull and she had only seen him once. Qi Jiao ordered everyone to immediately search for this bull and his sidekick all along the eastern coast. Meanwhile, the Demon King was sitting on his throne. It suddenly turned sharply cold. He realized that someone was not flattering him. Thanks to his upgraded and extremely fast bike in its generation, Jihu was able to avoid a collision with the master. On December 5th, warriors gathered on Dongming Mountain to defend their land. The numerous army along with the spirits were awaiting the arrival of the bull. The goal was only one: to end this war. Chai in turn blamed the boar for sending Ji to certain death. After all, it had already been 3 days and Hu still hadn't returned. The Spider-Woman thought he was dead. In his defense, the boar said that he didn't mean it, and it wasn't known for sure if Shiji had killed him or not. At that moment, Jir picked up the coffin with her web and dragged it behind her, the demon wondering what she was going to do. The girl replied that she intended to go to Whitebone Mountain in search of a boyfriend, declaring that if he is really dead, she will never marry, as a token of Hu's eternal gratitude. All the animals began to discourage her, for the bull could appear with his army at any moment. However, Chi had made the final decision. If she had known how things would turn out, she would have acted differently. At this time, the main character landed near them, literally making a crater in the ground. The young man realized that if he hadn't slowed down, he would have been dead by now. The upgraded bike was very fast indeed. Jihu noticed that his machine had turned back into a scooter. The young man assumed it was due to energy consumption, but with the help of magic stones, the situation could be remedied. As he lifted himself up, he saw the perplexed faces of the demons and asked why they were looking at him like that. An exasperated Jir asked him where he'd been all this time, since it had been 3 days. Hugh immediately released a python with burning eyes that started hissing at everyone. The guy calmed him down and encouraged him to find another place to cultivate. He also asked him not to return to Ime Peak. The serpent in turn flew into the heights and flew off in an unknown direction. The young man waved his hand at it. Spider-Woman pestered him again with her questions about where he had been. Jihu replied that it was a very long story. After which elixirs appeared in his hand, Ji inquired what they should do with them. Pouring them out onto the ground, the potions flew upwards for some unknown reason and flew towards the heavens. Chi managed to catch them with her web and drag them down, but they wouldn't budge. Jir asked the demons to cut rather unusual elixirs. Since their ki is incredibly strong and she won't be able to hold them back for long, the beasts looked at each other and drew their blades. Suddenly the potions burst out of the web. Hu immediately threw his kitchen knives at them. A moment later, the magic potions formed a kind of vortex. Chi asked the young man what kind of weapon he had used. As she looked at them closer, the spider was perplexed and couldn't believe they were ordinary kitchen knives. The surprised damsel turned to the protagonist and asked if he had actually used the kitchen utensils. The boar noticed that there were some words written on them. Everyone immediately tried to make out the inscriptions. Each knife had one word engraved on it that Jihu was a very good guy. Hu stated that it was originally a gift from his ex-girlfriend as she worked as a chef. All the demons started laughing and teasing him. In every way possible, Ji was extremely angered by their behavior. Even Chi began to scoff at the young traveler, for in every battle everyone would take notice. After which she said as a consolation that even if he wasn't very good with girls, he was clearly better than a bull. At this moment, thunder suddenly rumbled. The Monster King appeared in front of the demons. Jir ordered her warriors to immediately draw their weapons and prepare for battle. It's worth recognizing that although Hu's knives were kitchen knives, they were extremely dangerous at the same time. Ji armed himself with his miracle knives and rice cooker. The others also bared their swords and axes. The guy muttered that if the battle was lost, he would save Chi and they would run away together. Gur blushed and replied rather uncertainly that no one would want to run away with him. Meanwhile, the clouds were thickening, upon which absolutely the entire army of the Demon King had arrived. Suddenly everything was ablaze with fire. Chi Jiao also came up with his warriors. He wanted to kill the bull, for the monster was trying to take his wife. In response, the horny beast stated that he didn't even know him, and that he just wanted to chat with the girl and didn't know she was married. But the maiden used her manipulation on the immortal to get immediate revenge on this demon for her. Naturally, the cultivator listened to his crying wife and started burning everything to the ground. The bull in turn transformed into a huge cow again and rushed to attack Chi Jiao. Thus, the two armies began to fight amongst themselves, completely forgetting about the guy in Chi. Spider-Woman didn't understand why they were fighting each other, who asked her to just watch what was going on. Ji began handing out food to everyone, urging them in every way possible to stay out of the way and enjoy the show. Suddenly, Gur called out to her warriors to follow her into the cave. It was a completely different Chai lair that no one had any idea about. Curious, Jihu asked where the cave came from. The girl replied that she had been digging it for years, adding that she had wanted to make a secret passageway for a long time and had even installed magic stones. After that, the Spider-Woman opened some sort of portal, and they watched the confrontation between Chi Jiao and the bull as if through the ground. The ideal scenario would be for both cultivators to receive maximum damage to easily overpower them. The boar suggested attacking them since they had already used a large amount of energy, plus Hu has magic knives. Ji believed that the elixirs had been integrated into the knives and they had become stronger, but how to use them most effectively he didn't know. Chi said he needed to focus and put his hands on them. Exactly where it says he's a good person, Jir started laughing. The guy asked her not to remind her of that. The protagonist did exactly as the Spider-Woman said. Suddenly the knives glowed with some sort of magic. Jihu realized that it had worked, and he would feel the effects directly in the battle. Meanwhile, Chi Jiao began to win the fight with the bull, who hurriedly escaped. The naturally enraged immortal cultivator did not give him such an opportunity. The head of the eastern branch continued to launch flaming spheres at the wounded cow. At a certain point, Chi Jiao reincarnated into a huge and long dragon once again, after which he dealt a crushing and extremely painful blow to the Demon King. This caused the bull to fly into the rock near the entrance to the cave where the beasts with Chi were hiding. At this time, Jihu picked up speed on his scooter and urged them to open the entrance. The young man intended to use his rice cooker against the bull. Closing in on him, Hu tossed a furnace into the air, which sucked the exhausted monster lord into itself. In flight, the rice cooker changed its appearance. This led the guy to think that his bike worked on the same principle. Subsequently, Ji Jiao and his wife flew up to Ji, the protagonist pretending to pass by. However, the immortal cultivator recognized him and muttered that today was his lucky day, as he had met another lousy cultivator. Jihu instantly turned the scooter around and rushed forward, followed by the irrepressible damsel releasing a magical club of flame. Without thinking long, Hu threw the rice cooker at her and tried to escape. The mobile furnace in turn sucked in the immortal's wife. The maiden only had time to scream. The maddened cultivator didn't understand how this could happen. After which, the rice cooker blinded Qi Jiao with the rays emanating from it and returned to its master. The head of the eastern branch was furious and rushed after Ji, who was leaving him in the distance. Taking back his human form, the immortal released a fireball towards the guy, which hit next to the scooter, leaving behind a crater in the ground. At that moment, his scooter transformed into a Dodge Batlax and the young man flew into the air. The angered Qi Jiao followed him again, throwing spheres of fire at him. Hu called out to the master and showed him the rice cooker. The naive cultivator stated that it wouldn't work against him. Ji threw the furnace at him as a distraction, then unleashed his magic knives, which in turn did a lot of damage to the head of the eastern district. Qi Jiao wanted to use the sun amulet, but it ended up being chopped into small pieces. Qi and the rest of the demons swept up that if he used it, Ji would not be sweet. The cultivator urged the guy to stop, and the young man only gave a gasp in response. A moment later, he made a circle and was behind the immortal master, after which the miraculous kitchen knives used to chop up Qi Jiao's body were used again. The protagonist then raced away from the fierce immortal master. The demons noted the guy's extremely successful tactics because he could deal damage stealthily and used acceleration. Feeling the advantage, the young man once again unleashed a series of attacks on the sluggish cultivator. And hurriedly hiding again, Jihu seemed to be mocking the head of the eastern branch. The distraught Qi Jiao started blowing fire around him, not paying attention to where the flaming clubs were flying. Subsequently, one of the fire spheres went straight into the Spider-Woman's cave. The beasts began to flee the confines of the den in panic, Qi in turn trying to calm them down. However, the cliff began to collapse and gradually piled the passage with rocks. Jier also had to run away. Suddenly, the cultivator made a rather treacherous decision and flew towards the spider, intending to kill it. Then Qi turned into a six-eyed silver spider. Everyone was shocked and didn't know such a maiden ability. The immortal master had swept up that she was that ancient demon that had mutated into a silver spider. Jier didn't like her transformation herself, but she had no way out. Jihu took advantage of the moment, while Qi Jiao was distracted by Qi's transformation and attacked him. Spider-Woman accused the East County supervisor of forcing her to turn into an eight-legged monster, after which Jier began to cast her web at the immortal. The boar meanwhile urged everyone to take up arms and attack the master immediately. Wrapping him from head to toe in webbing, the demon began beating him. Qi Jiao muttered that it wasn't enough. It then exploded and scattered the beasts around, the chapter literally bursting into flames. The Spider-Woman was relentless in wrapping her web around him, but it wasn't working particularly well against the flames. The girl urged Ji to hurry up as she wouldn't be able to restrain him for long, who replied that he needed some time. The guy did some sort of synthesis of his knives to result in a cohesive blade. Qi Jiao turned his attention to the young man who was using unusual magic. At this time, Qi tried to tie him up again. However, the cultivator kept getting loose, so the sisters came to Ger's aid, and together they all released the web. The girl hurried the protagonist again because her energy was running out. Jihu applied magic stones, and the result was a full blade. It was a huge semblance of a kitchen cleaver, all with the same engraving that literally rang to the heavens. His name has forever left a mark on history. Countless demons have heard of him. In the fire cloud cave of the eastern land, one immortal ordered his servants to find out more about Jihu. The same situation happened in the Yellow Storm Demon's lair, where the cultivator demanded that the minions find out about this guy. Even on the lush mountain, the Cloud Dew sisters spoke of the young traveler. Meanwhile, the main character rushed to help Qi and attack the pushy Qi Jiao. The head of the Eastern District literally began to beg for mercy and closed his eyes in fear. However, nothing happened. Ger couldn't understand what had gone wrong. The ferocious cultivator, in turn, rushed to deliver a fiery strike to Hu. But on his defense became demons, who quite timely gave a rebuff to the immortal master. Ji suddenly said that they shouldn't be so tense, because he had everything under control. It was worth noting that the blue blade formed from the 5 knives could increase in size and was indestructible. Spreading out in a snide smile, Jihu asked Chi if he was doing well. The master couldn't understand what he was getting at. The young man had swept up that the power of the sword would not harm him on the outside, but on the inside, it would destroy his soul. And if the cultivator moved, it would explode. The immortal was perplexed. Just as he wanted to take a step, the guy reminded him again that he would be torn into small pieces if he stepped forward. Spidey didn't fully believe it himself, assuming that Hu was trying to trick him. Ji added that the master may not believe and make a move, but the consequences will be irreversible. Qijiao menacingly declared that he was afraid of nothing and no one. Jihu provoked him in every way possible, so that the master still dared to test it. At this moment, the head of the eastern branch's legs shook. The young man began to nudge him again. The immortal began to doubt the veracity of the guy's words. But if he wasn't deceiving, then the task became more difficult. She also decided to do her part by starting to provoke the cultivator in every way possible. Suddenly, Qijiao declared that he wouldn't budge, and there was nothing they could do to him anyway. At this time, a familiar female voice suddenly sounded. Shiji asked if the master wanted to play a game. All the demons stared at the ruler of the White Bone Mountain, who was playing on her laptop. The girl had just managed to pass the last level in the video game and was in a good mood. Shay looked at Ji and mouthed that she would like to borrow his laptop. The protagonist responded positively, because he uses a computer anyway, so he had no problem agreeing, after which the beauty said that she was willing to help him in the situation. Qijiao in turn realized that he was finished, and if he had known how things would turn out, he wouldn't have gone after the guy at all. At the same moment, the proverbial bull came to the party and urged everyone to stay in their seats. But when he saw a pretty girl, he clung to her like a bath sheet, beginning to praise himself and trying to get her as a groom. Suddenly, Jihu intervened and called out to him. The Demon King stated that he would deal with him later. After which, he continued to write out compliments to Shiji, but the girl did not fall for his extremely primitive tricks. Bull asked if they had met before. Shay replied that she had known him for a long time. The excited monster muttered that this was a fateful meeting. The beauty suddenly electrified, and a moment later the bull was pierced by lightning. A satisfied Chi led her sisters back to the cave. The next day, everyone continued to drink alcohol and party hard, dancing around under Ji's house. Who they eventually woke up. Hearing a noise outside, the guy looked out the window. Who saw most of the demons celebrating the victory and singing songs, having quite a good time. The bull in turn began serving Lady Shiji and served her cookies while she played on her laptop. Jihu was surprised that she had been out all night with the others and hadn't even drank her medicine. At that moment, Shur flew up on her bed to the young man's window and said that she felt much better, adding that video games helped her, and she enhanced it with magic stones and now it's gold in color. The protagonist agreed to give her the laptop and asked if it was all about him. At this time, the mistress began to feel worse, and she muttered that the sickness was beginning to return. Ji immediately gave her a drink of medicine, telling her that she shouldn't neglect them so that situations like this wouldn't happen. After which, Shiji felt better and asked if he wanted to rule Dongming Mountain. Who couldn't believe that the Lordess had actually offered him such a responsible position? Shay began to tell that she had been ordered by Babel of their federation to run the demon clan of the eastern land. But as time went on, her condition worsened. Especially the Monster King is too dumb and can't control anything. As such, another leader needs to be found, and he's the perfect candidate. Plus, the guy played good video games. Jihu stated that playing games and controlling demons are completely different things and has nothing to do with leadership. The young man suggested putting Chi in that spot, but Shiji said she wasn't the right person for it, adding that none of the monsters present, not even the boar, are fit for this, but him, to which he strongly disagreed, and replied that he was slightly worse than this guy, but much smarter. Shai took out the seal to Dongming Mountain and encouraged those willing to try their luck if they truly deemed themselves worthy. The board decided to be a pioneer and asked her how exactly to do it. Shiji replied that they need to write what they want and put a seal whose wish will be fulfilled will become the ruler of the mountain. The demons finally saw the divine seal, but were rather skeptical of this venture. The protagonist grinned and took stock of the fact that she wasn't fooling him. Then, opening the box, they discovered radishes underneath and were surprised. Ji remembered personally placing seals on the ground. Deja vu visited him. She noted the significance of the magic seal that held the souls of the animals from Dongming Mountain. Kaban in turn volunteered to be the first to test the seal, naively believing he would be the new head. The demon wrote that he didn't need to be given gifts of cars and houses for his wedding, then stamped it. However, unfortunately for the boar, nothing happened. He decided to wait a while longer. After that, he smiled at the lady and suggested to wait literally a couple of days to be sure. At this point, he was pushed away by the serpent and declared that he felt some sort of connection to the mountain, and so he too would try his luck. A Spider-Woman also participated after him, writing that beauty should include the color red. Shiji swept up that they were clearly not to the liking of Mount Dongming, and were not suitable for the role of ruler. The boar was extremely indignant at this wording, for he had lived on this mountain for hundreds of years. The disgruntled demon invited the next one to try, specifically the young traveler. Who didn't know which order to write? She decided to prompt and asked him to mention the discounts on cosmetics. But the guy spelled it out that if a family had more than 2 children, they were honored to be famous across the continent. As soon as the young man placed the divine seal on the piece of paper, the order glowed blue and soared into the sky. After which, the letter was burned with flames and scattered in the sky. All the beasts were shocked. From that moment on, the animals were filled with love and went home. Jihu realized that they wanted to conceive another child, thus the order was given by the mountain. The indignant boar began to freak out again, saying that his order hadn't worked and that some youngster had been accepted by the mountain as his own. Shiji was happy to declare him the ruler of Dongming, assuming that his home had something to do with the mountain. The demon asked if he was going to collect taxes from everyone or something similar. Hugh replied that he hadn't thought of anything like that. Shu in turn reminded him of his duties and great responsibility. The Lordess of the White Bone muttered that managerial concerns are not easy and he is obliged, will take care of the welfare. And if someone wants to take away his power, Jihu must kill him, while training demons is necessary. The young man confidently stated that he would do his best to keep Dongming safe. A suddenly smiling Shiji threw him a seal. Ji almost dropped it. A strong wind picked up. The trees in the forest seemed to bow to the new ruler of the mountain. The spirit of the mountain through the seal suddenly began to merge with the protagonist's home, then was pulled in by an unknown magical force emanating from the rice cooker. The mobile alchemical furnace in turn changed its coloring and appearance in general. Ji assumed that was his bonus as a newly minted overlord. Shay added that there is also paid vacation, and if he becomes a successful leader for 500 years, he will have a cave. After that, Lady Shiji hurried back to her place on Whitebone Mountain, where a new level in the game awaited her. Along with her, the ruler took an immortal cultivator from the eastern lands and a bull. At this moment, all the demons of the mountain greeted the new king of Dongming Mountain and bowed low to him. The beast asked Jihu, extremely convincingly, to take care of them as his children. The boar urged the new lord to put a seal under the order, asking the demon not to give him any wedding gifts. The serpent also decided to take advantage of the leader, asking him to chase the hare out of the cave to settle there. But Chi immediately chased them away and said that no one would dare to manipulate the ruler. Since this role is reserved for her, Jir immediately started asking him for a discount at the powder store. The protagonist hurried home. The indignant spideress urged him to stop, for she had not voiced all her demands. Time flew too fast, and our just ruler successfully coped with his new responsibilities. More than 2 months have passed since that very battle. It has been a beautiful spring on Dongming Mountain. Friendliness and cheerfulness flourished everywhere. Everyone forgot their hardships and sorrows. Life on the mountain truly became better. Unlike the ever-working Jihu, who longed for a vacation and was mostly preoccupied with paperwork. The only income came from selling elixirs, but that wasn't enough. The rice cooker didn't get any new features, hence the production of those very potions didn't improve. Ji was tired and decided to take at least a little break. Rocking back in his chair, he realized that this job was too exhausting. A way had to be found to get more money, but how to do it remained a mystery. At this point, a distraught Spider-Woman approached him. The young man inquired as to what had happened. Chi sadly mouthed that she had put on a significant amount of weight, and he didn't even pay attention. Hu had too much work to do and didn't see a problem with her gaining a little weight, which there was no way girls should be told. Ji bare her belly and said she's added a half-inch, and it's just awful. Ji began to tease, saying that there wouldn't be a flood or volcanic eruption because of it. The young man started touching her stomach and didn't find much change. At this time, Chi realized how it looked from the outside and stepped back. The girl blamed Jihu for her fullness because he's been making too many cream cakes lately. After which she demanded that he help her lose weight, Hu had no choice but to agree. The main character suggested that she go to Mount Shushan, where she would be chased to kill her, and then she would lose weight quickly. After a while, there was a sudden rumble of thunder. Jir and Ji saw through the window a large storm cloud coming towards them. As it turned out, an unknown Taoist dared to come to their land and talk about how no one could stop him. The demons were angered by his presence and urged him not to cause trouble in foreign territory. However, the cultivator continued to heat up the situation and provoke the demons. At that moment, the spider intervened and muttered that no one was afraid of him, and he would be unfortunate if he dared to harm them. The Taoist stared at the girl and abruptly stopped talking, the monsters not realizing what had happened. Suddenly, the stranger's nose bled, which the boar told him it would. The guy hurriedly wiped it off his face, after which he urged the demonic beauty not to try to seduce him. In response, Chi stated that she has not been doing this since she met Jihu. Taoist, however, had taken the hint that she had fooled him last time and no longer believed her words. Surprised Geyer asked him if they knew each other. The cultivator urged her not to pretend. The young man told how once she pretended to be weak, he felt sorry for her and gave her the magic stones he had saved up for years. Chai was immersed in her thought process for a while, but she still couldn't remember him. Cultivator was doubly offended that she really didn't remember him, or was faking it again. At that moment, her sisters came up to her and reminded her of the Taoist she had shown the way to the demons. Unexpectedly, Jier still remembered him and called him Huang Yang. The guy replied that his name was Chixi Yang. The protagonist began to recall such a spirit in Chinese history and didn't understand what he needed from her. He could only guess why young Yang was so desperate. Perhaps he had even studied the legendary sword art. At this time, Chixi turned to Ji and inquired what the man had forgotten among these demons. But Chi immediately stood up for her Hu and mouthed for him not to touch him, and if he couldn't wait to fight, she was ready. Jian resented the wording where she referred to the guy as her buddy. Jihu noted that it wasn't something he could think of. But the mechanism had already been set in motion, and the Taoist was flying at full speed to kill him. However, at that moment, the serpent came to the rescue and struck Chixi in the back with its mace. The monster said he was too weak and dare not attack their leader, much less glare at Gear. This resulted in a scuffle between them, who meanwhile hurriedly went to the house. But Yan activated thunder magic and immediately pierced all the beasts with lightning. Ji turned around. After which, the cultivator hurriedly attacked the head of Dongming Mountain and the Spider Woman. Jihu in turn managed to push Chi away, the master stating that he would leave her alone this time, but she should reflect on her actions. All the demons instantly rushed to the girl, wondering if she was all right, then noticed that Hu had disappeared. As it turned out, Chixi took the young man with him. The guy mumbled that he shouldn't drag him into his business. However, Yan said that he didn't have to stay by that conniving woman's side, or else she would squeeze all the juices out of him, confidently adding that a real man shouldn't fall for seduction. The protagonist wondered why he had powder stashed away in that case, since he probably wanted to give it to Chi. But the cultivator replied that he had found the item on the road and wasn't going to give it to Jier. Jihu realized he was at a disadvantage since he hadn't even brought his knives with him, and magical clothing wouldn't save him. Suddenly, Yan ran out of energy, and the sword they were flying on gradually started to stop. Chixi noticed that his secret power is not stable and he can only use it once a month, and only for 15 minutes. After a while, they arrived at some sort of settlement resembling a marketplace. The master said he would soon send him to the city. Walking through the bazaar, Ji noted the vast number of spirits and demons. At this point, they were accosted by a stranger who claimed 30% off at her store. After Ian made new acquaintances, he said a reconnaissance was necessary before they left the place. Walking into the tavern and sitting down at a table, Chixi ordered a cheaper meal. Hu swept up that he could pay for dinner. Master starts talking about giving Chi a chance to make things right, since she's raising 6 sisters, but instead, Ger gathered demons. Ji decided to ask Taoist how much he was paid to come to the mountain for the monsters. Surprised, Jan asked how he knew about it. The young man replied that no one would do it without a reason. The protagonist urged the cultivator to be honest and say who really hired him. Chixi ranted that a man once came to his door and called himself Taoist of the Two-Headed Snake Federation. Jihu realized that the plan to exterminate the demons from Dongming Mountain belonged to the head of the eastern county with that damsel. And since their federation was defeated by Lady Shiji, they hired a spy to eventually create a branch on their land. Hu asked Yang if he was going to keep killing monsters on Dongming Mountain. The master stated that he always fights for justice and nothing will stop him. But first he needs to send Ji to the City of Mortals. At this moment, a waiter came up to them and gave them a bill that was the size of 150,000 magic stones. Chixi was extremely indignant. The young man replied that everything is cheap except the shrimp soup from the Green Island, as the dish is filled with magical energy. Hu immediately calculated that one shrimp was worth about 30 stones. This gave him some thought, while the cultivator continued to yell at the waiter, refusing to pay the bill. The absolutely calm guy repeated his demand, but Ian stood his ground, at which point the unknown men suddenly broke into the stern. The people were armed with swords and said that the Taoist had no right to cause trouble in the Black Mountain Market. One of them muttered again that they would not leave here alive until they paid for their food. Chixie, in turn, didn't stand on ceremony with the bandits and attacked them first, using his thunder abilities. The protagonist urged him to stop fighting, for there was an entire army behind them. At this time, the huge stone golem that was in the vicinity of the market woke up. The Rock Guardian ordered the warriors to capture the rogue immediately and make them regret what they had done. Yang and Jihu immediately jumped on their swords and rushed away, but the warriors did the same and followed them. With the infinite blade technique, the cultivator easily dealt with the Black Mountain bandits. Suddenly, the golem summoned a boundless power, some kind of supreme power, who and Chixie didn't realize what he was doing. After which, a large stone hand swept toward them. Ji took off his t-shirt and slipped it over his palm. This caused the arm to disintegrate into a multitude of stones, and Taoist and Jihu hurriedly fled. Ian was surprised that the guy turned out to be no ordinary person and could use magic items. The protagonist asked him to speed up because he was freezing. Meanwhile, the golem had once again summoned an unknown force for help, and another palm appeared in front of them. This time Hu had to sacrifice his pants, which he also threw over his arm and destroyed it. However, it was not enough as the Stone Guardian followed them again. Chixie volunteered to help and threw herself into the battle with the rocky palm, actively using her skills. However, he was much less fortunate. His hand simply slammed him against the rock. The magical beast itself called for warriors to kill another cultivator. Meanwhile, Jihu landed on top of the mountain, freezing from the savage cold. Suddenly, the rice cooker came to the rescue and signaled its arrival to the owner. Furnace mouthed that he was held up by a fox who likes to change clothes outside the cave. The warriors were puzzled and assumed the creature was a demon. The rice cooker called herself Pot and claimed that she came from Dongming Mountain and was the Lord's magic item. Ji shouted happily that it was his alchemical mobile furnace where he brewed elixirs. Pot said that he had found his mind and was glad to serve him, whereupon he gave Hu a fox belt. The surprised guy didn't understand why he needed a belly belt. The rice cooker convinced him that she could handle everything on her own. At this point, Furnace turned to the bandits and urged them to surrender, but they flatly refused to do so. One of them muttered that he was only a magic item and wouldn't be able to handle them. After which, he hurriedly attacked Pot with the sun amulet, which spewed out spheres of fire. However, the rice cooker was not so simple. The magic furnace defiantly absorbed all the flames. The warriors were shocked by such skills. Sweat remarked that it was too easy for him, thus provoking the cultivators. The bandits immediately unleashed their fire blades at him, but this attempt failed as well, since the rather agile magic item easily dodged all attacks. Risovarka muttered that they should have surrendered, for otherwise death awaited them. However, the blades still managed to shred the fox's belt on the furnace. With that, Pot looked threateningly at the warriors. They realized that nothing good was about to happen. The magical item mouthed that, in addition to making an attempt on its master, they had also ruined his souvenir. It was worth recognizing that this tool for making elixirs did carry a great danger for any wizard. A moment later, sweat enveloped everything in flames. The thugs were shocked that he could use absorbed fire. The end result was that most of them were burned by the rice cooker. Jihu realized that he really only had to watch what was happening. After the furnace had destroyed everyone, he began to mourn the fox belt that had been cut into small pieces. Hu's point was that sometimes you have to give up the old to get the new. Pot replied that Dongming Mountain is indeed full of enchantresses like flower spirits. At this moment, the same irrepressible stone golem suddenly appeared in front of them. The naive guard called for the young cultivator to surrender, noting the cowardice of his charges. Ji tried to stall and asked the rice cooker to give him magic knives, but the oven gave out plasticine. The protagonist reiterated that it was the knives that he needed. Sweat immediately released the kitchen utensils, spinning around the host. Then they turned into a huge cleaver. Golem read the good Jihu on it and realized it was the same guy the girl dumped. Risavarka in turn asked the Lord to leave this demon on him. Sweat asked if he had the proper paperwork to prove he was legally living on Black Mountain. The stone stalwart replied that the entire Black Mountain belonged to his master. Suddenly, a voice sounded from the forest, stating that not all of the territory belonged to this rogue. Golem didn't realize what was happening or who it was talking to him. He looked fearfully toward the dense forest. Seeing the plants approaching him, the worried guardian began to run away in an attempt to escape. However, the long and fast vines still caught up with the extremely slow stone dwarf. This resulted in them tying him up, but the golem managed to consume the pill, and a moment later he grew 4 more arms. Subsequently, the guardian disentangled himself from the numerous plants, after which he rushed towards the protagonist, mouthing that he must die. But at that moment, it was as if stars began to fall from the heavens, which drew their attention. A second later, a rather creepy-looking maiden emerged from the forest, blood on her face, herself covered in a black robe. Jihu swept her up. She looked quite powerful. The magic golem literally trembled in fear, then hurriedly fled. Suddenly, the girl waved her hand and ghosts flew out of the forest and followed the guardian. As a result, the spirits easily caught up to him and began to deal extremely painful blows. It happened fast enough, the demon turned into a pile of rocks in seconds. Then the stranger uttered that all who would come to the temple of Lanruo would be destroyed. He realized that it was actually Xiaqian competing with the Spider-Woman, and there are 3 witches living in the temple, and she is one of them, at which point the damsel turned sharply toward him. Immediately, dozens of ghosts appeared behind her back. Ji realized he had walked into a trap. The protagonist urged the rice cooker to issue him knives and apply protective formation. However, an overconfident Pot said he would personally deal with the scum. But as soon as Furnace approached them, the witches were instantly at the guy's side. Xiaqian in turn began to slowly wipe the blood from her face, after which she also defiantly took off her black robe, turning into a rather pretty girl. The other ghosts followed her transformation and took on human form. Hu asked if they were the legendary enchantresses from Japan. She looked at him in surprise and asked what Japan was. Upon seeing the young man's magical knives, the maiden immediately began to induce him to visit their store. Saying that they had a magic staff created from the branch of a 1,000-year-old tree, Jihu replied he would not give up his knives. Then the cunning witch began to offer him magic pears that increased his strength and longevity. The sisters suggested that the guy was cold, he replied. He had cold medicine and didn't need anything. Ji tried to walk away from them, but the irrepressible maidens kept offering him various goods. The lady also tried to interest the young man through a secret technique where he would be given a ghost girl on top of it. He realized that they were only chasing profit, and he felt sorry for those who wanted to marry Xiaqian. Ji thanked her for her help and extremely politely declined her services, after which he bowed to her and muttered that he had once heard of her. The girl immediately fixed her hair and called herself Liu Mu, the forest witch. The young mangaka knew that she would become an old forest demon in the future, though she didn't look like that at all. Hu decided to ask her which one was Xiaqian. However, the witch didn't know what he was talking about. Jihu was shocked, for Lanruo Temple couldn't be called that if it didn't have Xiaqian in it. Suddenly the boy sneered and shuddered from the cold. The witch realized the young man was freezing, whereupon she offered him her medicine, which she personally made. But the protagonist refused and said he could use a warm place and a little nap. Liu suggested he go to the Lanruo Temple, where he would be fed, and put to bed, especially since the building had recently been renovated. After a while, they came to the entrance of the temple, which had a far from refreshed look, which Hu had noticed. Mu stated that it was 300 years ago, and such a span of time was nothing to demons. Once inside the temple, Jihu began to look around and came to dread. Because the windows were not closed, some tables and chairs had no legs, and there was a hole in the roof. Jai thought everything on Dongming Mountain was in a deplorable state, but Lanruo Temple in this sense broke all records. While Lu's strength was at mortal level, and how they came to that was unknown after all, you could just steal something. Mu then walked him to a room where Hu could spend the night, inquiring what else he needed. Jihu said he didn't need anything, thinking to himself how polite she was, and even had his clothes ready for him. At this point, the damsel again started trying to sell him some soothing sticks she had made herself. The protagonist instantly moved to his bed and closed the door behind him right in front of the pestering lady's nose. The ghost girl asked her why she said she made those sticks herself, since they picked them up on the road. Meanwhile, the boy was settling into the room and was about to go to bed. Jihu asked Pot not to steal anyone's belts when he was asleep. Furnace promised not to do so, adding that if he did, he would lock up as punishment, but he could hardly believe it. Naturally, when the young man fell asleep, the magical pet jumped out the window in search of something interesting. And since he wanted to become an international thief, this time it wasn't the belt he stole. Upon waking up, Ji was completely alive and well, for he thought the witches might have stolen things from him or killed him altogether. Sweat immediately reported back on how he slept and didn't steal anyone's belt, who assumed he did steal, but a different item. Opening the door, Jihu saw Liu, who stated that a thief had snuck in during the night. Naturally, the young man understood everything. The main character tells her that he intends to leave them today and return home. The frustrated witch replied that they would see each other soon and said goodbye to the boy. Walking past the rooms, Ji noticed the vast number of different items in them. Where it was full of talismans and herbs with elixirs, it was no wonder Liu wanted to sell him a couple items. At this point, the ghost girl said that when the bull fought the spider, they wanted to sell everything in the eastern lands. But the battle ended too quickly and no one needed these things. Lee's point was that absolutely everyone living makes mistakes, and it's normal, so it's no big deal. However, the damsel stated that this kind of thing happens every year. They buy a bunch of stuff no one wants. The main character realized why their business wasn't thriving and found themselves at the bottom. G asked why they needed so many magic stones. As soon as Mu started to answer the question posed, a miracle happened. At this moment, several cultivators flew above them, heading towards the Black Mountain Market. Lao encouraged everyone to get down to business immediately and lure visitors, who had noticed that her trading business was not going well, or rather not going at all. Out of 10 people, only 3 stopped, but it later turned out that they were asking for directions. However, one of them still stated that he wanted everything. The girl instantly brought him purple grass. As it turned out, the guy was referring to a completely different service than goods, for which he got what he deserved. The witch wasn't shy about punching him in the face. Jihu in turn asked the rice cooker to give him 100 magic stones, then paid for an overnight stay and included service, with a pretty good tip. A satisfied Liu mouthed that she would always look forward to his return, for he was welcome here. Suddenly, Ji returned. A surprised Mu greeted the young traveler. The young man offered to help her sell all these items and maybe even make a little money. The protagonist whispered something in her ear. Liu hesitated to think it would work, but Hu said it was necessary to try anyway and agreed to stay with them longer. He then summoned the other witches as well and explained what needed to be done. After waiting for the cultivators to fly past them again, the guy signaled to the girls. They in turn started shouting that they had huge discounts and they couldn't find cheaper goods. Surprisingly, it worked, and a crowd of people were already buying herbs while the sick Hu sipped tea wrapped in a blanket. Liu and the girls were selling all their wares for 5 stones apiece. A whole line of artisans lined up at their counter. Afterward, a joyful Mu returned to her savior and thanked him for his advice, but saw him in a pitiful state. She offered him free medicine, but Hu refused, saying he was fine, adding that he has a lot of ideas on how to promote their business, for example, to organize a lottery. Liu asked for more details about it, but the young man suddenly fell asleep in the midst of the conversation. The witch covered him with another blanket and urged her friends to be quiet. Mu knew he should be thanked when he woke up and asked him how to do business the right way. A moment later, Ji woke up and saw a Spider-Woman with an army of demons. Liu and Qi instantly engaged each other, the dumbfounded guy wondering why they were fighting. The protagonist urged the boar not to stand aside. The beast was surprised to see its leader. He rushed over to hug him, saying that everyone thought he was finished, and Jir wasn't finding any room at all. The girls, meanwhile, continued to fight and express their personal dislike for each other in every way possible. Hu urged them to stop immediately, but the boar remarked that they were always fighting as soon as they saw each other. Ji asked for more details about what had happened between them that was so scary. Demon replied that when Qi wanted to fool another man, he was stolen from her by Liu, and they've been feuding ever since. Guy couldn't understand how Jir could lose, since she was the first beauty in the eastern region. At this point, Reddy urged Jihu to go home immediately, but Mu intervened again. The witch asked where they were going. Chi replied that their home was on Dongming Mountain. Then Liu asked the Spider-Woman to keep the young man occupied for a while. Jir almost fell over when she heard this. After which, Mu ran up to him and thanked him for the good idea with which she had earned over 500 magic stones. And now they had money for new goods. The young man had advised her not to spend on the next batch, but she was sure otherwise. The smiling witch then suggested he join Lanruo's temple, which was quite predictable, adding that she will pay him generously for various business ideas, and if he teaches her how to run a business too, she will earn even more. However, an exasperated Qi declared that Ji is one of them and will never join the dirty business. At that time, Liu offered Hu a monthly salary of 500 magic stones. Reddy replied that they could offer him the same profit and even better. Mu in turn spoke of 600 stones. Jir raised it to 700. The Spider-Woman set the bar at 1,000 stones, and Liu immediately fell silent, realizing that she didn't have that kind of money. But the witch declared that she would give him 800 stones and in addition 1 beautiful ghostly maiden. The girl cried and asked why Mu was selling her since she was doing everything right. Liu smiled and said it wasn't a sale. Pointing at the young man, the girl added that he was quite a handsome fellow and rich besides. The ghostly lady approached Jihu and bowed low to him, saying that she agreed to be his slave. Mu stated that if that wasn't enough, they had more girls just as beautiful. Ahead of the event, the boar had implied that he and Kihua loved each other and had no intention of parting. She muttered that Ji was actually the ruler of Dongming Mountain and couldn't accept her offer. However, Liu continued to talk about how there were some very nice maidens about them. Reddy noted that Hu reads stories to her sisters every night and is very close to them. But it was as if Mu was deliberately repeating the same thing, that they had beautiful girls. Jir stated menacingly that the guy was like a brother to all of them, but she apparently didn't understand that. After much debate, Chi turned sharply to Ji and urged him to choose one of them. Each one tried to pull him to their side, who had no idea he was so popular with the women. Suddenly the ground began to shake. The worried Spider-Woman began to look around. Liu said it was just a gateway to the afterlife. The demons were shocked. Mu added, Judge Wang visits them once every couple months. Who knew that this portal is for spirit rebirth? At this moment, someone stretched out his decrepit hands from the gate and declared that he could send one maiden to the Hangzhou head family, where she will be in the role of only daughter, and if Liu wants, she can buy the place. The protagonist could not understand how a ghost could be reincarnated for money. Mu in turn agreed because living in a well-to-do family is happiness. However, whether his intentions were serious or not, since Wang had already deceived her last time, the judge swept up that he was giving a 100% guarantee this time and requested 5,000 magic stones. Liu started haggling, which Wang didn't like, and gave her a condition. Either she pays or he leaves. Mu immediately asked the girls to raise the necessary amount of money to send Lan to a happy and carefree life. The ghost girl spouted off that the afterlife is corrupt and everyone only thinks about money. Where there are their rates of existence as a princess or in a well-to-do family, it all cost a few thousand stones. Jihu realized why Liu was so diligent in gathering magical resources. At this time, a disgruntled Reddy uttered that this spirit was too kind-hearted. Unexpectedly, Mu asked Hu to borrow 1,000 magic stones, and after Lan's reincarnation, she would marry him. Ji found a small bag of money and said that was all he could help her with. The witch instantly yanked the stones out of his hands and handed everything to Wang, bringing Lan with him. The judge then urged the maiden to enter the portal, as he had connected him to the 6 divisions, and they were running out of time. Satisfied, Liu remarked that they would meet in 18 years and said goodbye to the saddened girl. However, at that moment something strange began to happen. The Black Mountain was suddenly embraced by some kind of magic, and the clouds began to thicken over it. Then there was a loud rumble, a strong wind, and the ground shook. The main character was literally nailed to the temple wall. He couldn't move. A voice from the heavens spoke out that Mu had caused him too much trouble and retribution awaited her. Jihu assumed that it was actually an old demon of the Black Mountain. Although the monster didn't show itself, it was clear that it was at a high level of cultivation, and perhaps even earth grade. She muttered that the old demon was very strong and cultivated secret arts, which was why he couldn't leave the Black Mountain. A moment later, hundreds of huge bats flew out of the black cloud. They headed straight for the portal to the afterlife, something Liu could not allow. The witch ordered Lan to immediately run into the portal, while she held back these monsters. Mu instantly summoned her ghosts, who flew out from that very tree. The demon's voice spoke again, that his army of bats would kill them without his help. It's worth noting that the monsters were really skillful at dealing with ghosts. It also got to Liu, who couldn't understand when the monster became so strong. At that moment, one of the mice was behind her. It was already looking to attack the witch. However, Reddy intervened in an extremely timely manner and destroyed it, thereby saving Mu's life. Whereupon the Spider-Woman summoned all of her demons, immediately rushing into battle. Jihu swept up that she also hated Liu. She suddenly called herself Tsundere. Hu swept up that Jir had really helped with her team, though she had to transform into a spider again. But Ji was unwilling to just watch what was happening and called upon his cleaver to do his part by killing dozens of bats. A voice from heaven spoke out that the man should not have interfered in their affairs and therefore death awaited him. After a couple seconds, the number of monstrous mice increased many times over. Chi urged the young man to be extremely careful. Jihu looked at his pet, who stood idly by and watched them fight. After that, the guy let Sweat into the fight so he wouldn't get too comfortable. The rice cooker showed a masterclass and spread a flock of mice using items he had pilfered, which was what the demons were talking about. There were also the boar's belongings and Reddy's sword, which she had lost not too long ago. Snake joined the others and said that there was even a poisoned dragon spear in the furnace. Lan in turn asked Liu how Mu's gift ended up in that pot. At a certain point, all things and items ran out of the rice cooker. The magical pet instantly turned around 180 degrees and headed towards its master. The Ghost Maiden started saying that he could just swallow those mice. Sweat replied that there were too many of them and he would not be able to do it. Hu shouted out that he must have more items. Suddenly, the pet remembered the junk he had piled up. Various dining and household supplies flew into action. However, there was little they could do to harm the demonic bats. But at a certain point, a big house came out of the rice cooker, which was pretty weird. Everyone was shocked and tired at the main character. G stated that he didn't know where he got his house from, or how he even fit in the oven. Finally, the battle ended. The old monster just disappeared. It seemed like it didn't even realize what had happened. Pot then started picking up all the scattered stuff and saying he could fix it all. At that moment, Liu and Jier came up to him and said that they now knew where their personal belongings had gone. Then the girls started chasing the rice cooker. He claimed in his defense that he found it all on the floor. The boar in turn wondered what they would do next. Meanwhile, Mu hurried Lan, will go to the afterlife, where a happy reincarnation awaits her. The girl cried and hugged her mistress. She decided to advise her after all. Get married as soon as possible, because she's not getting any younger, and it will be much harder to do it later. The indignant Liu replied that she was only 1,200 years old and still young and beautiful, and marriage should be by fate. Lan added that she needs a rich and young guy with a house of his own, and who is the perfect contender. The main character as well as the Spider-Woman were perplexed when they heard about the marriage. Reddy said she would never get G. Mu was of a slightly different opinion. After which, the sad ghost girl slowly headed into the portal. The witch muttered that she shouldn't worry so much, and they would meet soon. Liu hoped Lan wouldn't forget her by then, and they could see each other, which she told her. The girl instantly turned around and wondered if she could really forget everything. But for sure Mu didn't know. The girl wiped her tears and gathered her thoughts, then walked into the gate. The witch in turn tried to contain her emotions and not sob. However, a moment later, Lan ran out of the portal and threw herself into her older sister's arms, saying that she didn't want to leave her. Liu tried her best to calm her down, telling her that they had paid a lot of money and she should hurry or the portal would close. The girl stood her ground and declared that she wanted to stay with her, even as a ghost. The protagonist scratched his head and wondered if she was still a spirit. The sisters began urging Mu to leave Lan behind and pick up a few things from the afterlife. Chai in turn demanded a contract from Liu, the witch initially not understanding what she was talking about. Jier clarified that since Hu is helping Lanruo Temple, which is a strategic place for business, so a contract needs to be drawn up. Mu hesitated. Reddy started to prod her, and the witch still agreed. The surprised boar asked Jihu if they were staying here. After that, Liu and the Spider-Woman started haggling again, the witch trying her best to lower the price. Mu stated that she doesn't even know how to cook, because when she boiled the soup, she almost burned down the entire kitchen. The guy realized that passions were heating up, and he decided to intervene to calm the girls down. Afterwards, he asked Liu to be gentler sometimes, and give him something to eat since he was hungry. At the same second, a few leaves fell from her silky hair to the ground, which eventually grew into a huge tree with fruit on its branches. Mu swept up that each peach was worth 5 magic stones. The young man picked one and ate it. The witch mouthed that these fruits are usually only eaten by her, and for some reason the other girls don't want them. Jihu said that Lanruo Temple is at the foot of the Black Mountain, but it is the market that is thriving, not this place. Liu replied that the Black Mountain demon was very rich and had long wanted to use her with her sisters. The mountain itself is not fertile and there are no resources there, and one day this monster personally asked for their help. But 20 years ago he received support from dark forces and even found the seal of the mountain left behind by an ancestor. Back then their goddess was busy cultivating, and the Black Mountain passed into his hands. Thanks to this seal, the demon found a rare silver powder that was used to make magical tools. Even a pinch of powder is said to be enough to increase the likelihood of success in creating materials. Then he built a market on the mountain where the tools are simple and cheap, but that is why they are popular, and the bazaar is thriving. Ji asked if the other monsters wanted to take over the Black Mountain. The witch replied that there were some, but no one knows what technique the old demon is using, especially since he is at the initial level of the Earth realm. The protagonist realized that their long-term existence was a miracle. Liu explained that this demon can't leave the mountain and is constantly sending his subordinates or his clone to them. He has 4 main clones and 2 that have been dead for a long time. At this moment, a few cultivators flew past them. The girls immediately began to lure them with their discounts. However, the people said that the king had lowered the prices of all goods, and now they all had 5 magic stones each. Mu was furious and ordered her weapons to be issued to teach the scumbag a lesson. The sisters in turn rushed to calm the knife-armed Leah. The witch muttered that he had done it for a reason, for in this way her business was jeopardized. At this moment, a fat little man suddenly appeared in front of them. Mu said he was the manager of the Black Mountain Market, and his name was Jing. Hu knew him as the owner of the tavern where he and Yang were. The rich were indeed greedy and strange people. For having the position of manager, he still tried to cheat the customers. At this time, potential buyers appeared on the horizon again. Liu said that she had all the items at 5 magic stones each. But the money-hungry Jing shouted that his wares were cheaper, namely 4 stones each. Then the witch decided to also sell items for 4 stones, plus every 10th purchase gave a bonus, the size of 1 item. However, the tireless manager reduced the prices to 3 magic stones. Following him, Mu hurriedly lowered the price as well, but Lan swept up that they would only lose from it. Jin stated that she would lose this war because his king had ordered prices to be set lower than Lanruo Temple. The angry boar muttered that they could steal their business and force the market to close. The cocky manager teased him, saying he was extremely curious to see how they would do it. At this moment, the worried Lan and Liu asked the protagonist to think of a way to take out this insolent man. The arrogant Jin, in turn, continued to provoke them in every way possible. Suddenly, Chi came over to them and dragged Hu's backpack over to them and asked him what was inside that it was so heavy. Reddy then emptied the contents of the bag onto the ground where there were various utensils. Jihu pondered long enough on how they could come out victorious from this situation. And after a few minutes, he did utter that he knew how to gold the Temple of Lanruo. Everyone was excited about Ji's next brilliant idea, and he said they could open a diner. The Black Mountain Market representative responded that this is ridiculous, because they have 6 restaurants, and they can't outshine them with their diner. An exasperated Reddy declared that she would personally cook and show them how it should be done. However, the boar urged her to calm down and not add to the trouble, especially with her cooking as a lethal weapon. After all, last year her dish of roasted filet and peppers killed 5 monsters, and even a snake that was immune to poisons. She replied that it was the only mistake and it won't happen again. Jier's sis also didn't want to eat the Spider-Woman's cooked food because she had broken 2 fangs last time. But Reddy stood her ground and declared that she could cook well, which the others naturally had doubts about. At a certain point, the girl turned around and saw Jihu behind the counter. She asked what he was going to do. The protagonist tossed the meat into the air and followed it with his magic knives. As a result, they sliced the meat beautifully and in thin layers, which lay neatly on the plate. Jin muttered that anyone could cut meat like that, and he didn't see anything special. The young man then asked Liu for some vegetables, if she had any, of course. The witch instantly rushed to her magic tree and said that she could grow any product, given the energy. Mu calmly plucked the mushrooms from the tree and headed towards Hu. The demons were puzzled, not understanding how vegetables could grow on a tree. Jihu was also impressed and savvy that she could open a grocery store. After that, the guy continued his magic and chopped all the vegetables. Meanwhile, cultivators filled the entire courtyard to observe what was happening. People wondered if his dish was ready. Ji replied that he needed the last ingredient. Sweat immediately gave him a strange object. Jin was dumbfounded, for he recognized it as the seal of the Black Mountain Market. The manager literally began to beg the young man not to do so, but Hu chopped the seal in half with a lightning-fast movement of his hand. The market representative was furious, and stated that it takes an ounce of time to create such a seal. Ji, in turn, paid no attention to him and continued to slice the seal with his straw, then asked Pot for a frying pan. The magical pet instantly split into 2 and appeared as a frying pan. After a while, the main character started roasting all the vegetables. Jin's implication is insane since he's using a magical tool as an ingredient. Jihu added some onion and ginger, then covered the pan with a lid for 3 minutes and reduced the heat. And when everything was ready, Ji offered people to try this unusual dish. Cultivators began to argue amongst themselves about whether or not magic items could be used in cooking. Who mouthed that the cuisine of 9th generation China, known as university cooking, where recipes were taken from the ceiling. Ji asked who wanted to try first. All the demons took a step back, thus Jin was in the lead. But he flatly refused to eat the dish, so the boar decided to help him. The monster grabbed him and ordered him to taste this concoction immediately. However, even then he turned his nose up and said they would not make him do it. Reddy in turn got fed up with the fat man and said she would personally feed him. But seeing one of her sisters try a bite, Chi instantly rushed over to her and demanded that she spit it out immediately, which the little girl eventually did. As a result, a huge fireball flew into the rock. Everyone was shocked. Jin instantly picked up the plate and mouthed that he would try it after all. The young man offered to make him white jade or pumpkin stew, but he declined. When the manager tasted the dish, he spit it out and said it was the worst cooking he had ever eaten. Cultivators noted that flavor is not important here. What matters is how it feels. A blushing Jing turned to the people and said with a twisted face that he had a stomachache. They speculated that the little girl might have awakened some kind of magic. At this moment, Jihu declared that he would still make a white jade dish and pumpkin stew. Surprisingly, the Spider-Woman volunteered to help this time. Hu didn't mind. Ji swept up that he could transfer some of the power of the magic tool to whoever ate it. Masters could not understand how the attribute of a magical tool could be conveyed through food. The guy said that the main thing is that their stomach can withstand. Besides eating the same dish several times, the effect does not add up. Jihu continued to convince people that magical items improve their inner attributes. But Jing declared that it was all lies and there was no such cooking method, and accused him of bribing the little girl. Then the young man offered him to eat the pumpkin stew, but he began to refuse again. She couldn't stand it and literally plopped him on the ground and poured the stew into his mouth. All the cultivators instantly asked him how he felt. At this moment, a silver glow could be seen on his hand. Like a jade bracelet, people were surprised. Jin personally saw it on his brush and realized that it was indeed true and the stew worked. Whereupon the animated people began to pelt the fellow with their requests. The Black Mountain Market representative hurriedly went back and reported the incident to the king. However, he never managed to do so. Jier grabbed him with her web and plowed him to the ground. Then the rather benevolent monsters started beating him up. Meanwhile, a fierce battle began where Lanruo Temple confronted the cultivators, who wanted to exterminate all demons and ghosts. Suddenly, Chixie and Chi met eyes. Spider-Woman instantly threw himself into the fight, saying that he had no right to come here and cause trouble. Ian hastened to explain that that wasn't why he was here at all. But Reddy was unstoppable. She accused him of kidnapping Jihu, who caught a cold afterward. Watching what was going on, Ji urged her to help Liu, and he would take Chixie over. The protagonist asked Ian where he had disappeared to after the fall. The master immediately landed and replied that the cultivators had told him about a 1,000-year-old monster that had been vexing the Lanruo temple. At that moment, the cultivators attacked them. They accused Chixie of helping demons and tried to kill him. However, with their joint efforts, Hu and Yang easily defeated the naive warriors. Ji realized that they had actually been ordered to do so by the demon of the Black Mountain. Moments later, a group of cultivators tried to kill them again, but Pot came to the rescue in time. The magic pet immediately collected all the trophies and dealt with the wizards. The guy stated that no one could break them and suggested that Ian meet up sometime and chat over a cup of tea. However, at this time, a huge statue flew at them from the sky, which Jihu shouted out. The young man still managed to dodge and jump aside, unlike Chixie. The unknown old man was watching from the sidelines and was surprised at the child's quick reaction. As it turned out, it was a perfect immortal named Jin Guan. Meanwhile, the fierce battle continued, with everyone actively using their abilities. The protagonist came to the conclusion that it was best not to interfere at this point. But an enraged Jin suddenly headed in his direction, trying to kill the guy. However, Guan discovered that Chixie had survived, and the immortal rushed to fix it. Perfect Master urged Jihu to stay out of the way while he took care of Yang, which in turn wasn't as easy as it may have seemed. Chixie subsequently dealt Guan the hardest blow. As a result, Jin collapsed to the ground with a thunderous crash. The cultivators became enraged. As such, they rushed to attack him, but suddenly Yan's eyes blazed with fire. And a moment later, he turned into a huge monkey. Everyone was terrified. Liu in turn realized why his energy was so unstable. The gorilla meanwhile scattered the cultivators around, simply killing them. The boar wondered what they should do now, as watching this monster destroy the temple was a bad idea. Hu stated that they needed to initially find its tail, so that by chopping it off, the monster would turn back to Yan. At that moment, the tree flew towards Liu. Ji instantly picked her up on his bike. In so doing, he saved her from certain death, whereupon they drove away from the monkey to a safe distance. And they began to think about what they should do next, and how to turn Chixie into a human form.